Score holiday gifts everyone wants for way less at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save on UGG, Nike, Rag & Bone, Vince, Frame, Kurt Geiger London, and more.
Because there's always something new.
I'm giving all the gifts this year with that extra 5% off when I use my Nordstrom credit card. Santa who?
Join the Nordy Club at Nordstrom Rack to unlock our best deals. It's easy. Big gifts, big perks. That's why you rack.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. We're going to be chatting in segment number 2 with one of our good friends, Tristan Freeman. He does an amazing job over at Bustin' Brackets, taking a look at this great game of college basketball. We're going to chat with him about a few different things. We certainly need to dive in on the ACC-SEC challenge that we're going to be seeing coming up today, as he's based out there in the city of Pittsburgh, so he has seen the Pittsburgh Panthers up close and in person. We'll break down some of the big matchups, how the ACC is looking a little bit different than they were a season ago, the tenor of what we've been seeing out there in the SEC as well. We're going to talk about the start of conference play for some of these teams as well. Yes, we are getting Big Ten conference play here today as well, and some of the teams that just have been impressing / not impressing him as well. So we're going to have a great chat there. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lars DM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire into whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter / X questions today, everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better. They're making it better to be able to jump in on some daily fantasy than ever before, because all you need to do is go to BETR.app and then you type in the promo code of VSiNPod. That is VSINPOD. That gets you $10 free. All you need to do, take a look at the board, try to determine, all right, is the player going to go over or under their stat line? You can also go with some money lines, and you can go with some spreads as well if you're out there in a jurisdiction that allows that, and you're all good to go. And we're all good to go to take a look back at what was a small but fun college basketball Monday. Let's try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
There were no ranked teams in action, but we did have Villanova, an unranked team, out there in a power conference, pull away from Temple late. They were only up 1 point at the half, 74-56. They put the final touches on Temple, as Temple, uncharacteristically, they did not cast away too much from 3. They went 3 of 8 from the threes that they took, but they took 8 threes for Temple. Very slow, controlled game for them. They lose the turnover battle 10-9. They only attempt 46 field goals in this game, so a very low possession game. And for Villanova, they got Duke Brandon back after he missed their previous game. He looked rock solid, 14 points, 8 rebounds, and it was Tyler Perkins who led the way, 6 of 9, very nice from Florin, 5 of 7 from 3-point range. So in the Philly 5 matchup, it was Villanova got the job done. We saw a double overtime thriller, which Troy, for the 3rd time in the last 2.5 weeks, has played a game of at least double overtime. I had someone on Twitter / X say, you can't spell Troy without OT, and boy, oh boy, is it true. And hey, you got the OT and Trojans as well. 93-89. West Georgia, big double-digit underdog, coming up outright on the money line, and they do this despite going 11-22 at the free throw line. You had Josh Smith come off the bench and go 5-20 from the floor. You don't see that very often, and Sheldon Williams-Dryden, who's really the top player for West Georgia, an okay 16 points, but it was all about Chase Lewis, who was able to supply 26 points for West Georgia. They actually did a really good job taking care of the ball. 5 turnovers in a double overtime game, and that's why they won this game, because Troy shot 9 of 28 from 3. They weren't great, but they were better at the free throw line than West Georgia at 18 of 29, but 17 turnovers for Troy, 5 for West Georgia. That was the difference, as Victor Valdez, he was able to supply 29 points for Troy, but not enough to be able to get the job done there. For Iona, they've been a pretty solid team thus far this season, 89-66. They absolutely run away from Delaware in the second half, as Delaware 7 of 23 from 3, Iona 12 of 26 from the outside. Iona also won the turnover battle 12-10, and CJ Anthony, who was just a guy that couldn't get out there on the floor over at Cincinnati, he has come in and he has been great for Iona. 26 points, so rock solid winner there. Another money line underdog cash in North Alabama. They were able to take down Jacksonville State, this by a count of 73-66. For North Alabama, they win the rebound battle 41-39, and they were very much beneficiaries of Jacksonville State going 9 of 20 at the free throw line, while North Alabama went 14 of 18, difference of 7 points. Free throw shooting, kids, always take note of it. And for Tarleton State, when I did this podcast overnight last night, they were a 17.5 point underdog. They closed in some places like 24.5 point underdogs. Dior Johnson was out along with a few others for Tarleton State. And for Cincinnati, they did get a little bit of a boost with a few guys returning like Jalen Celestine and Baba Miller. But Cincinnati, they cover that opening number. They don't cover the close. 76-58 the final. They were up just 2 points at the half. And the only reason why this game got out of hand is that Cincinnati uncharacteristically got hot from 3, 15 of 36. Kirk Risa can shoot you into a game or out of a game, and actually shot him into a game. 6 of 11 from 3-point range. Day Thomas was able to go 5 of 11 from 3. Now, this was a sloppy game with a bunch of turnovers. 21 for Cincinnati, 19 for Tarleton State, so not necessarily a thing of beauty, but Middle Tennessee as a home underdog, that was a thing of beauty. 76-61. They take down UAB as Middle Tennessee, 8 of 20 from 3-point range, 19 points out of Torrey Olson, and for Middle Tennessee, they lose the rebound battle 39-36, but UAB has been spotty with their 3-point shooting, and they go 6 of 26 from 3-point range. Xavier no cover, but a nice win over St. Francis, 96-74 the final. After a rough start to the season for Xavier, their offense is online with Rodney Anderson coming off the bench. He had 28 big points in this one, and for the Red Flash of St. Francis, 8 of 22 from 3-point range to be able to cover that one. In the nightcap, Stanford, a nice win and cover over Portland. This was a number that got up to 19.5, 94-72 the final. As for Stanford, 14 of 33 from 3. Jeremy Dent-Smith off the bench, 5 of 10 from the outside. Benny Geeler, he was able to Geeler done with 15 points. And for Portland, hard to be able to win the game when you lose the turnover battle 18-8, as they actually shot halfway decent, 5 of 12 from 3, 24 of 47 from the floor, but those turnovers absolutely destroyed them. And for Cal Baptist, they were able to get a nice cover against Colorado. This by kind of 78-70 for Cal Baptist. In a lot of places, they open up as big of 10.5 point underdogs. And Dominique Daniels, rock solid 25 points in this one for Colorado. They actually trailed at the half. They were able to pull away late with the fact that Cal Baptist only went 2 of 13 from 3-point range. And for Colorado, they do win the rebound battle by a count of 41-35. Nice performance out of Isaiah Johnson. He has been an underrated freshman who did give Colorado in this game 17 points. And then this was also a very intriguing game with having Bowling Green go on the road. They take down Kansas State as a double-figure underdog, so the Dogs were very much a bargain on this day, 82-66 the final. As for K-State, they go just 6 of 23 from 3. I thought that there might be a little bit of shooting regression, and there was. And for Bowling Green, Sam Towns was bowling for 27 points. He goes 3 of 5 from distance. Bowling Green, 12 of 26 from the outside. In Kansas State, they do actually surprisingly win the turnover battle 8-6. Bowling Green has been very good at generating turnovers, but no made shots for Kansas State on this day. And for Incarnate Word, they do take down McNeese as a little bit of a money line underdog themselves, 71-67 the final. As for Incarnate Word, the word was that they went 8 of 21 from 3 with Davion Bailey going 7 of 15 from the outside, 29 big points for Incarnate Word as well. They win the rebound battle 29-23, as Gawari Duel did have 18 points off the bench, but it was a duel that Incarnate Word was able to win. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise what we're getting in college basketball, if you take a look at what we saw on Monday, again, those money line underdogs were barking. They went 5-7 on the money line, but there were a few double-figure underdogs, so if you did nothing but take underdogs on the money line, you made yourself a bunch of money, as you also had 7 unders, 5 overs with regards to games on Monday. And man, We could have used that Chicago State versus South Carolina State game to start the day, but you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites have really been having themselves a nice time. So it was nice to see that reversal for underdogs. 161, 123, and 5 against the spread for favorites in the last 7 days, hitting at a 56.7% clip. And unders are hitting at about 56% over the last 7 days. 160 unders, 123 overs, and I believe we've had 6 pushes along the way, if math serves me correct. And if you're looking overall for the season, the under rate is 51.3%, 637 unders to 604 overs, while favorites hitting at about 51.1% against the spread, 633, 606, and 17. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Tristan Freeman, who does such amazing work over at Boston Brackets, here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at CBBAnalytics.com. That is CBBAnalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Tristan Freeman aboard. He does such a great job over at Boston Brackets, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Additionally, I know that he's very locked in with a little bit of everything over there at various places like Sleepers Media. He's been doing some work over at the Field of 68 on the written side of things as well, and you're able to follow him on Twitter /X at HoopsNut351 all together. And Tristan, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Greg. Thank you.
I always appreciate you, Tristan. Tristan, we are just coming off of Feast Week, all of those big-time tournaments, and how do you take a look at the landscape of college basketball now that we've got these in the books? Because I do think that there's going to be a lot of overreaction to maybe what we saw over the past week or so, but certainly I feel like we learn much more about these teams with many teams going on the road / a neutral court for the first time all season.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of teams have been tested. I think just about everyone in the top 25 has faced at least one really good opponent. So we get those sample sizes. I think ultimately you want to see among those who are preseason Final Four contenders who looks the part, who doesn't, which ones has flaws. Just about everyone still has some level of weaknesses anyway, but some, maybe more fixable than others. But ultimately, it's still just 1 month. We still get another month of non-con play. And for some conferences like the Big Ten, league play actually starts to get going.
Yep, I certainly do think that that's very valuable. And with regards to what we've seen here in the early goings of the season, I know that there's always a debate as to conference hierarchy, what have you. And I just have been really impressed by the Big Ten with so many dominant teams because everyone's talking about Michigan because of what we saw out here in lovely Las Vegas. But Michigan State, the way that they've pounded teams into oblivion, Purdue has done nothing wrong thus far this season themselves. You're able to go down the list, even a team like Nebraska has gone undefeated. And I feel like they've been one of the best positive surprises thus far this season after, I think most people thought that the Big Ten was going to be solid. I don't know if they quite expected this, though.
Yeah, I mean, we knew, Purdue was going to be a Final Four national title contender. And then behind that, it was pretty much anyone's guess, but, several Big Ten teams in the preseason ranked. Michigan State was a team that, was a huge surprise last year. And then they lose their key pieces, and yet somehow they might be even better than last year. So they obviously were a huge winner. Michigan with a new front court, but still just as good. It's going to be imposing. Illinois has had some losses, but they played a very tough schedule and got to be impressed by that as well. So I think obviously Purdue is still the favorite in the Big Ten, but there's, now at this point, 4 teams that you could argue are going to be fighting for regular season title. And obviously, the SEC was, the king conference a year ago. But right now, you got to say that the Big Ten is definitely the conference to beat overall, just in terms of, which teams have a shot to make it to the last weekend.
Yep, exactly. And I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of that conference, to say the least, as Tristan Freeman, he does such an incredible job over at Bustin' Brackets and so much more. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Tristan, it's going to be really interesting to see how the ACC stacks up, because we remember the ACC-SEC challenge last year, and it was a complete and utter smackdown. Let's call it what it is, but it feels like things are a little bit more equal this year. I would say that the SEC is still ahead of the ACC, but what are you taking a look at the next few days when this thing gets started? Because I do think that there's going to be a lot of great matchups, especially highlighting that Louisville versus Arkansas game that we're going to be seeing on Wednesday that I feel like could be really big for the ACC.
There's been tweets going out about how the SEC has struggled against, top competition, and they certainly have been vulnerable. I mean, Tuesday's slate for the challenge is going to be awesome. Florida has shown, vulnerabilities already, and they have to deal with Duke. Kentucky being injured, it's a massive test against North Carolina. So this is a huge opportunity for the ACC. They sort of had up and down feast week with some teams doing better than others. But, outside of, some of the top teams in the SEC, like Alabama, Auburn was pretty good as well. I think the upper tier in the middle has been vulnerable. So if you're the ACC, you got to find a way to get these wins because, the opportunities now, considering that December tends to be a lighter slate, is going to be fewer and fewer. So if they can find a way to make it an even series the next couple of days, that's great if win. But just more importantly, they got to show that they're going to be competitive, because last year it was just not competitive at all outside the top teams. And they got to find a way to fix that if they want to get more bids this time around.
Yep, exactly. And I think that that's a big theme once again for the ACC, where it doesn't feel like the bottom's as bad as it was in past seasons. Certainly, Boston College has been less than savory, to say the least, but it does feel like there's a little bit more balance this year with the ACC, and that could help, say, a bubble team be able to get into the NCAA tournament, unlike in past years, because I know Georgia Tech, they took a few losses in the Emerald Coast Classic. If that's one of your bottom teams, you're feeling relatively good about that. Syracuse looks improved. Your Pittsburgh Panthers, I know that they lose to Quinnipiac, but a massive bounce back against Ohio State. And it just feels like the overall depth of the conference seems to be returning a little bit more than it has been in past years.
Yeah, the one team that kind of looks hopeless right now is Boston College, who's right around 500. It's rough for them. Syracuse, they went winless in players there without arguably the best player, Donnie Freeman. So hopefully once he comes back.
That defense has been good for Syracuse, though.
Yeah, and they were largely competitive in the games and really had a close loss to Houston. And then, the others, SMU, Clemson, you're doing their part. Cal and Stanford, 2 teams that were projected to finish at the end. Yeah, Stanford has slip up with Seattle, but they've done well in Feast Week as well, too. So I think the depth in the league should be good. You just want to limit how many landmines there are. So far, there's just one in Boston College. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks and whether or not others join them as teams that aren't going to be, ones that you want to lose to for your resume.
Yep, exactly. As Tristan Freeman, who does such great work over at Boston Brackets, is showing me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I feel like there's been a lot of pretty pleasant surprises. We're doing this ahead of the Stanford versus Portland game on Monday, but I would certainly throw Stanford in that boat. I've really liked what I've seen out of them. We just mentioned Syracuse. A 4-3 record doesn't look great, but I feel like they played much better than that. And I know you brought this team to my attention prior to the start of the season. Virginia Tech, they've looked relatively rock solid as well. And I do think that the middle teams for the ACC are really starting to step up. And I'm going to be very curious to see what they do here in the next few days, because I think that they could really be able to put the ACC back on the map a little bit more after your median ACC team. It felt like they were like a sub-top 70 or so team. I feel like there's going to be a lot more teams this year in the ACC that are hovering more in like that 40 to 60 range. Maybe they don't make the NCAA tournament, but are very much going to be like NIT teams and teams that should be able to approach 20 plus wins.
Yeah, and look, for several of them, they need to be there because, the hot seat is not just for BC. There's other teams and coaches where there's pressure on them to compete. Steve Forbes of Wake Forest and obviously Red Autry of Syracuse. Like, they need to get defining moments. And Autry almost got his in the Houston game, but he has a chance to do so against a Tennessee team that did go unbeaten and got some really good wins, but they can also be too reliant on Jacoby Gillespie at times. And if he gets shut down at home, it could be a very winnable game for the Orange. So I think that's probably one of the most important ones, especially because the Orange needs to make up for, again, the 0-3 week they just had.
Yep, and I think that this one could be a very important one as well. SMU is currently undefeated. They have been tested. There have been some nip and tuck games for them. I'm looking at that Butler game, but as of right now, they're undefeated. But Vanderbilt has looked like, in my opinion, one of the better teams in all of college basketball. They should be ranked a whole heck of a lot higher than what they are right now. And as we know, these are two teams that do not play very, very slowly. So if you're one that loves defensive slogs, this might not be the game for you. If you like points, this should be very, very appealing. But I look at that game, and even though it maybe doesn't jump out the way that something like a Duke versus Florida will, I think that game is going to be a whole big bundle of fun this week.
Yeah, I mean, it easily could be first to 90 wins. And you're right, Vandy is a team
might be first to 100.
Yeah. I mean, Vandy has been one of the more underrated teams because they don't necessarily have a star, but they just have several guys that can put up a lot of points. And so does SMU. And I think this is going to be a statement game for both teams. Still fairly winnable one for the Mustangs, but yeah, I think the one concern that we had from last year is SMU could not defend against good teams. They just got blown out by many of them. So if Vanderbilt stacks up to be one of those good teams, so it's going to be a really good test to see if the Mustangs have improved or if it's going to be the same thing from last year.
Yep, I think so as well. And then is there any other games with regards to the ACC versus SEC challenge that you really have your eye on, whether that be an ACC team trying to be able to come out of the woodwork, or heck, maybe it's just an SEC team looking to prove it as well, because I think we both agree the SEC is still a very rock solid conference. There's no doubt about it. Not quite the same conference as it was a season ago, though.
Now, all the NBA scouts will be at the Louisville versus Arkansas game with all the stud freshmen there. But I think the game that's really interesting is NC State versus Auburn. The Wolfpack was really disappointed in Maui, in part because their defense was just off. And that wasn't something that we expected. But, to go up against Auburn team who showed that they can absolutely score. So this could be another one that could be the same level as Vandy and SMU when it comes to first 90 or 100 wins. That's a game for both teams where, hey, how serious do you take them? Because people thought NC State could be a top 3 or 4 team, but based on what we saw in Maui, I'm not sure. If they lose this one, then you're going to see a lot of doubts even more creeping.
Yep, and we've seen the best of times and worst of times for Auburn as well. They had some good performances out there in Las Vegas, and then against Michigan, obviously a good Michigan team got completely blown out there, and when you recall that first game of the season going to overtime at home against Bethune-Cookman. So we've got a lot to take a look at with regards to those two teams. Tristan, you've got your finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything college basketball. You're out there in the city of Pittsburgh doing a tremendous job holding it down there, and I know you do some written work over at just a wide variety of places. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me at Hoopstud351 on Twitter/X, and you also follow my main site at Boston Brackets, where we're now going to be looking at where team stands in many of the leagues, including the ACC. And then we'll be starting to cover the start of league play with conferences like the Horizon, Big Ten, and others getting going.
Yep, Big Ten conference play is going to be a lot of intrigue, to say the least, with so many dueling styles. We've got a lot of fun there. I mean, even though we're past Feast Week, we've got a lot of great action this week. Tristan is going to do an amazing job covering it all, and every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Tristan Freeman, who does an incredible job over at Bustin' Brackets, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GUnit_81, and we are going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving two larger conference teams first, and then these are the conferences that are going to be represented in the extra games, and it only takes one team from these extra game conferences to be involved. That would be the Patriot League, the Big South, the MEAC, the SWAC, the America East, the Atlantic Sun. If I haven't said so already, the Southland is in there as well. And if I didn't say the Northeast Conference, the Northeast Conference. So how about if we do get things started with 601, 602 on the card? Campbell is on the road against Penn State. Penn State finds themselves as 11.5-point favorites. Total open up at 156.5. This has been pile driven down to a 152, and I'm going to take a 152 over. I did set my total at a 153.5, so I'm in between the opener and the current number. But with this Campbell unit, they have been looking to push a little bit more tempo. They're now in the top 150 in terms of total possessions per game, and you're actually seeing a tale of completed utter opposites, because you've got a Penn State team that last year was in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Now they're 317th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Penn State, to their credit, they're making the most out of their possessions because they're just flat out not turning the ball over. They're only turning the ball over about like 8.5 times per game. That's a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. Not necessarily the world's most efficient offense because they don't grab a lot of offensive rebounds, but they are shooting 37.5% from three. Malik Tunka has come in as freshman, 14 points, shooting 47.5% from three. You've been able to get Freddie De Leon going a little bit more. He's really the lone holdover from last year, 13 points per game. And then Caden Mingo has been the head of the snake, about 4.5 assists, 14 points, 4 boards. Don't have a single guy on the team that averages more than 4.5 rebounds per game. But in this case, it's not really going to nip them too much because you don't have a Campbell team with a whole bunch of size. You got 6'9" Dovideus Butica, who comes over from Pepperdine, 15 points, about 8.5 rebounds per game. And then Chris Fields, he has been able to get the team 7.5 boards, 12.5 points, began his career at Norfolk State as a 6'7", a little bit of a forward, but for this Campbell team right now, they're shooting less than 27% per three. That should be going northward a little bit as you've got DJ Turn It Up Smith, who comes on over from Robert Morris, long and winding road for him. He's been able to get this team 19.5 points right now. He's shooting about 31.5% per three, more of a career 34% three-point shooter, and Cam Gregory, Tazos Cook, these guys are more ancillary guys who have been in the program for quite a while, but this is a Campbell squad that that has had a very tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 3 in terms of ball security. I think that that's going to be hurting them quite a bit in this spot. Even though Penn State not generating the same turnovers that they have in the past, it's still the Mike Rhode system to be able to win that turnover battle. Still a top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and I think that allows them to get the job done. So Penn State is a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 13 with them, and I do like this over. I set my total 153.5. 603, 604 on the betting board. America's favorite tag team. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both. They're on the road against Duquesne, and you get 6 to 6.5 points with this tag team. And the total on this game is anywhere between 165.5 to a 166.5, and I set my total at a 162.5. I'm in on the under. William and Mary taking a couple fewer threes than they did 8 seasons ago. It's still a William and Mary team that's gunning it. They're a top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, and last year Duquesne was outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, and Duquesne has been one of those teams that has experienced a little bit of tempo shift this season. Currently 25th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that this is going to be going downward a little bit, and for William and Mary, they're starting to find their footing with their 3-point shooting, but 32.1%, not awful, but somewhat mediocre. Kate Askins has come over from Dartmouth, giving you about 9 points, shooting 39% from 3, and then Reese Miller has been really the main scorer, 12 points. He shoots 40% from 3. Team's main point guard and Chase Lowe has had a little bit of a disappointing year scoring, but it's giving you 4.5 boards, 4 assists for a William & Mary team that is turning the ball over 15 times per game. Now, top 75 unit in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they themselves have actually been a really good 3-point shooting defense. They're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3-point range, and that is a big reason why I'm in on the under. Even though you're going to get a lot of possessions, I think that you're going to get a lot of dead possessions in this game, and for Duquesne, they themselves are turning the ball over 15.5 times per game. That's a little bit of an issue. They've been pretty efficient when they haven't turned it over. There was Terrence Guignard, 19 points, shooting 47% from 3. John Ugley's been in college basketball for seemingly 500 years, but I have like 6'9", 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Still waiting on Maximus Edwards, who came over a few years ago from George Washington to really find it going. Has never really been the same player, but this is a squad as well that has been able to do a pretty rock-solid job in terms of holding teams down from 3, allowing them to shoot only 30% from the outside, not grabbing for themselves a lot of second and third chances, though. So it is a very interesting spot here with William and Mary. I do think that they're going to be able to hold up a little bit more down low. In the end, I do think that Duquesne finds a way to be able to get the job done. I think that William and Mary get to see a little bit of negativity with regards to that 3-point shooting defense. Set my line at 8.5, so going to be willing to lay up Duquesne. I do think that you're going to get a lot of dead possessions in this game, so my total 162.5. I'm in on the under. 6-5, 6-6 on the card. East Tennessee is on the road against Dayton. Dayton is a 10.5 to an 11-point favorite. 142 is the total. Set Dayton as a 12.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 12 with them. Dayton already some impressive wins. They've been a little bit wobbly this season, and they are now inside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. By that I mean they're outside the bottom 65 in terms of total possessions per game, so they're speeding themselves up just a little bit. Still not an overly fast team, but 7'1" Emil Latang has had a really good versatility. 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, and he's right now shooting about 38.5% from 3. Deshaun Montgomery, Javon Bennett in the backcourt has been a really nice duo, combined for about 31.5 points per game between the two of them, 6.5 assists per game, and for Dayton, they've really done a good job of generating turnovers. Top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're allowing teams to shoot 38.5% from 3. We should see some positive regression with that, and for East Tennessee, typically this is a squad that they just absolutely go out there and dominate on the glass, and there's still a team that has not done a bad job on the glass. They're still a top 150 team with regards to rebound percentage. Not quite the same as it was 8 seasons ago. You do lose so many of the guys that have been in that front court for quite a while. Jordan McCollum and Brian Taylor are the lone guys that give you over 4 rebounds per game. Both give you 5.1 boards per game, and Taylor comes over from SIU Edwardsville. It's been a do-it-all sort of guy. 2 steals, 3 assists, 14.5 points, shooting 39.5% from 3. Cam Morris has come over from UMass Lowell, and he's been able to shoot actually 57% for 3 with 14.5 points per game. We'll see that take downward a little bit, but ETSU much better this year at generating turnovers. Top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so do think that there's going to be a little bit of sloppiness, and even though ETSU is not quite the same team on the boards, they have been able to shoot 62% from 2-point range. They're a top 75 team in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that they are going to have a little bit of strife against a Dayton team that I just flat out think is playing a little bit of the same style as them. And I think think that they're going to be able to execute it a little bit better. And then you have someone like a Keontae Jones who comes over from CSUN, Cal State Northridge, give you 5 boards, 8 points per game. And the Dayton squad has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of limiting second and third chances on the glass as well. So I do like this Dayton team to be able to get the job done. I'm willing to lay up to 12 of them, so them as a 12.5 point favorite. I'd set a total of a 142.5. I do think that both of these teams are going to see some positivity/negativity with their 3-point shooting, so I'm willing to lay it with Dayton, and I'm going to be in on that 142 over. 607, 608 on the card. Syracuse is going to be playing us at Tennessee. Tennessee is a 6.5 point road favorite. Total is 145.5 to 146.5. Set Tennessee as a 7-point favorite, so 6.5, the absolute max I'm going to be willing to lay. You still got Donnie Freeman deal with injury for Syracuse, so that's not necessarily amazing, and with the Syracuse squad, you've been able to have Kyan Anthony be able to step up in the interim. He's been able to give the team 12 points per game. That is actually the son of Carmelo Anthony. We'll see if Freeman is able to go or not, but J.J. Starlin was out for a few games. He's back. I honestly think that might be a little bit of a subtraction by addition, though, because he's not necessarily the world's greatest defender, and with him, he's not necessarily a great 3-point shooter. I mean, he's a guy that's able to give you some scoring, but man, that is not great to say the least. And with having Donnie Freeman most likely out of the fold in this game, that means that William Kyle needs to step up down low. He's been able to get the team 10 points, 8 boards, 2.5 blocks per game. He's been rock solid there. Syracuse lacking with regards to their 3-point shooting. They're shooting 29.5% from 3, but Nathan George has been able to dole out good, clean offense. 3 turnovers per game. Would like to see that go downward, but 9.5 points, 5.5 assists per game. And then on the other end, you just have a Tennessee team that is always a tough customer. This team over the last 5 years has been in the top 17 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis every single year. They've had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 200 in terms of ball security as they break Jacoby Gillespie into that Zakai Ziegler role, but he needs a better scorer than Ziegler. 18.5 points, 5.3 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. JP Estrella had a little bit of injury concern, but he needs to be able to get the team 12 points, 5 boards. He's all good to go in this one. And then the ancillary guys, look at Jalen Carey, who comes over from Vanderbilt, has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Felix Apara, he still does a great job, give you 5.5 boards, 2 blocks per game. There's just not a lot that you can get inside on this Tennessee team, and with Syracuse really lacking from 3-point range, I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. Now, you've got a Tennessee team that has honestly been playing a little bit quicker this year. Tennessee, in terms of total possessions per game, right around about 185th in all of college basketball. Syracuse, they're clocking in more around 205th. I think that you get an under here. Both of these teams do rank in the top 40 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so give me the under. I said my total 145, and with Tennessee, I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 609, 610 on the card. Michigan State plays us to Iowa. Iowa finds themselves as an underdog of 5.5 points on this game. It is 136.5, and I said Michigan State as a 5-point favorite. 5.5 is my minimum point here on Iowa, but for Iowa, this has been just such a well-oiled machine in terms of efficiency, as this team is outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, but a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They really just don't turn the ball over, less than 10 turnovers per game. They're shooting 38.5% for 3 with Ben Mercer being a do-it-all guy. 18.5 points, 5.5 assists, 1.7 steals, shooting 45% from 3-point range. And Alvaro Falgarius, who comes over from Robert Morris, 6'9", do-it-all player, 10 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots 47.5% from 3. This team just knows their role very well. Not a team that's going to generate a lot of second and third chances on the glass, but they've also been a top 45 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well. They guard the 2 well, they guard the 3 well, and for Michigan State, this team pretty much does everything well except for pop it from 3. We've seen them come a little bit more alive with that 3-point shooting up to about 34%, and you've got Jackson Kohler right now shooting 46% from 3. I think that'll go downward. 14.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game, but Jeremy Fears, he's become a much better scorer this season. 12 points, 9.9 assists, and he's currently shooting 47% from the outside. You could use a little bit more of the likes of Trey Ford, Kurt Tang. These are not necessarily great scorers, but they know their role on this team. They help out with regards to their good, solid defense. Carson Cooper has done a nice job, give you about 6 rebounds per game, and for Michigan State, they don't generate turnovers the same way that Iowa does, but they do a nice job taking control and care of the ball as well. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, so I do think that you get a bit of a slog of a game, but I do think that this is going to be efficient. I think this is going to be close enough for late game fouling. I set a total here of a 137, so at the 136.5, absolute max buy point on the over, but it's a buy point on the over, and 5.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Iowa. 6-11, 6-12 on the card. It is Virginia Tech on the road against South Carolina. South Kakalaki is anywhere between a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog. Depends upon your book as to whether or not they're a favorite or a dog. Total on this game, it is 149.5. That's at a total year of a 145.5. I'm going to be in on the under for Virginia Tech. This squad has been playing a little bit more quickly this year, as currently they're about 104th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. South Carolina back to being a relatively controlled team. They're about 207th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but for Virginia Tech, they do have a lot of size and just disruption around the perimeter, because you bring in Nicolas Avadeus. He was over at Greece last season, actually played some professional basketball, and he's been a nice little do-it-all guy. The scoring has gone downward for him over the last few games, but 13.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. The team is dealing with an injury to Toby Lual, 10 rebound per game guy that has been out the last 2 games, and we've seen the defense very much suffer without him. In the 2 games without him, they gave up 77 to St. Mary's, and then they got completely ballroom blitzed against VCU because the game was being played in a ballroom, so they did get ballroom blitzed. But that said, Amani Ansberry has been able to give you 15.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and you still have a trio of guys, Tyler Johnson, Jane Shute, Jalen Bedford, that are all shooting at least 40% from 3. I'll give you between 9.8 and 10.3 points per contest, so relatively well-rounded team. And for Virginia Tech, top 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They really don't turn it over a ton. They're outside the top 110 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is a South Carolina team that has had a little bit of a tough time on defense against, shall we say, better competition, but this squad has still been able to do a pretty solid job not allowing a lot from 3. They've been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and you got Michi Johnson back in the fold, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. Not a team that's going to wow you with their 3-point shooting, but the overall just versatility of 6'9" Mongolian Mike, 11 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal, shooting 38% from 3. I think that's going to be big. Miles Dute is still shooting only about 24% from 3-point range. I do think that's going to be going northward, and even if he does play, Toby Lual probably not going to be 100%. That helps out a South Carolina team that's been outside the top 150 in terms of rebound percentage, and this South Carolina team is just running you off the 3-point line. In terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 3, they're a top 25 team in all of college basketball. Not really generating a lot of turnovers for South Carolina, but they themselves a top 40 team in terms of ball security. I think that's just enough to get the job done in a relatively mid-tempo game. I set my total at 145.5. I like the under, and with South Carolina, set them as a 1.5 point favorite, so won't take them as a money line underdog / laying a point. 6-13, 6-14 on the card. Pittsburgh is going to be playing us at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a road favorite of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 149.5 to 150.5 is the total. Set Pittsburgh as a 3-point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. Now, Texas A&M is currently number 11 in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but even though Pittsburgh has had some mixing and shaking in the backcourt, not doing a bad job of taking care of the ball. About 12 turnovers per game. This has been a top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, as well as this team is very much based down low in Cameron Corrin. 15 points, 9.5 boards, a steal, a block per game, shooting 40% from 3. I absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table. And then DeMarco Minor has been very major as well. 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2 steals. He doesn't necessarily just take over the game with his scoring, but he finds so many ways to be able to contribute. And then Papa Amadou Kante only gives you 3 points per game, but he's been able to slide the seat with about 5.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to give them some rough and tumble. And for Texas A&M, it just feels like they're still trying to figure themselves out. Really nice win a few days ago over Florida State, a team that just could not find it from 3, but I mean, they are shooting 38% from 3. A&M is, they're allowing opponents to shoot 38% from 3 because they gamble for those turnovers, and when you gamble for turnovers, oftentimes that leaves you vulnerable from 3. That has very much been them. Ruben Dominguez has been able to become a really nice go-to scorer for them, right now shooting just below 50% from 3, 15.5 points per contest, and Rashawn Agee down low has been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Lone guy on the roster has given you more than 4.3 rebounds per game. Zach Clemens has been able to give you a little bit of something. The former Pittsburgh big man, Frederico, so nice they named him twice, has been able to give you about 4 boards per contest as well, but it's an A&M team that it feels like they're going a little bit too up-tempo to be able to truly utilize the size and the big men that they do have. They're getting Mackenzie Mbakbo back. That's going to be able to help them out quite a bit. He was a NBA draft prospect, and he's got good versatility, but That said, in the end, I do think that this A&M team is going to have a little bit of a tougher time generating turnovers against this veteran Pittsburgh backboard, and I do think that for Pittsburgh, they exploit the fact that A&M has not done the world's greatest job of being able to guard the three-point line, and you're going to have a little bit of tempo battle. You've got a Texas A&M team that is very much looking to gun it, 29th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pittsburgh, currently, they're checking in about 334th, and I think that Pittsburgh slows this game down. So by total 149, I like the under, and Pittsburgh outright on the money line made Pittsburgh the 3-point favorite. 6:15, 6:16 on the card. It is George Mason. They play us to Cornell, and our good friend George finds themselves as a pretty good sized favorite. George Mason, a favorite of anywhere between 10.5 to 11 points. 154 is the total. Set a total of a 156.5. I like the over. You've got a Cornell team that, once again, shock, surprise. They are playing quite up tempo. It's a Cornell team that's currently 13th in the country. Serves the total possessions per game, and we always talk about the harebrained three-point shooting rate and the fact that they take so many threes. What taking so many threes does, and currently, they're taking 36 three-pointers per game and only 27 two-point shots per game. That actually makes the two-point shots much more efficient. They're, once again, back in the top 35 in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. They're shooting 42% from three, and this is going to go downward a little bit. Let's call it what it is. And they have also been turning the ball over 15 times per game. Cornell used to be a whole square than some of its parts or approach. Now they've been a little bit more top-heavy. Cooper Norad has been the head of the snake. 21.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's shooting 44% from three. Adam Hinton, well, he's been hitting it hard. He's been able to give you 13.5 points, shooting over 41% from three-point range, and other than Jake Feigen, who's only been able to play in 3 games this season, currently dealing with an injury, nobody else really gives you more than 8 points per game. It is a team that's a little bit better on the glass. They bring in Casper Sepp from Valparaiso. He's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and you've had Josh Baldwin be able to chip in there like 5 or so boards per contest as well. But this is a George Mason team that's just flat out a tough customer. They're back in the top 30 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're shooting over 40% from three-point range, with Corey Mincy giving you 19.5 points. He's shooting over 50% from three. Jari Long is shooting over 50% from three. As a matter of fact, you've got each of your top 3 scorers shooting at least 50% from three. Again, a number that's going to be going downward, but George Mason just does a relentless job on the glass. Top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage. Riley Allenpatch, who comes over from Sam Amford, 11.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's the guy that last year shot in the high 30s from three-point range. Jeremiah Hill has been able to give you about 11 points, 5 boards. So got all sorts of versatility and a George Mason defense that allows teams to only shoot 28% from three-point range. George Mason, okay, but not amazing in terms of generating turnovers. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up-and-down game, as George Mason has shown a little bit more willingness to run this season. George Mason, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in about 323rd, which that's pretty much on par with what they were a season ago. But when a team speeds them up, they are able to take full advantage, and I think that they will here. So my total 156.5, like the over, and George Mason will lay up to 12 with them. 6:17, 6:18 on the card. Georgia State is on the road. They're facing off against Mercer. Mercer is a mid-sized favorite here of 11.5 to 12.5 points. The last game is 153.5. I said Mercer is only a 7-point favorite. I'm going to take the points with Georgia State. Georgia State has been a little bit wobbly, really, ever since Jonas Hayes took over the team a few seasons ago, but I do think that they're going to figure it out with a veteran backcourt that has a pair of guys I like in Jelani Hamilton along with Malachi Brown. These two guys have both been able to give you double figures. Now, Hamilton has been dealing with quite a bit of injury over the last few weeks, and I'm thinking that he's going to be good to go here because he was able to go in that game against South Dakota State, but he only played 19 minutes in that South Dakota State game, so I'm thinking he's in, but he's not necessarily 100%, but just getting him back I think is going to be big. And then you've got Joel Chappell, who's been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. This is a Georgia State team that's been able to do a pretty okay job on the glass. They're a top 225 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage. Now, they do need to clean up the 14 turnovers per game, but I foresee a little bit of positivity with the fact that they are quite honestly 365th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. And you've got on the flip side a Mercer team that has been a little bit better defensively in year number 2 under Ryan Ritter, but this is not necessarily a team that's battened down the hatchets themselves. This team is outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're just allowing second and third chances like crazy. They're outside the top 345 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, it's a Mercer team that's shooting it better from three. They're shooting 36% from the outside. You've had a guy, Zaire Williams, who began his career over at Wagner, come in. He and Quentin Perkins Perkins are both giving you about 13 points per game. They're both shooting over 40% from three. And then even though he's not necessarily a great three-point shooter, Baraka Okoji, he comes over from George Mason, 17.5 points, 6 assists. I do like what he's able to bring to the table. And then Armani Mighty, well, he has been mighty with his 8.5 rebounds per game, but again, allowing a lot of teams to be able to get those second and third chances as well. And then Kyle Cuffey, who began his career over at Syracuse, Kansas, just expected a little bit more than like 8 points per game, so it is a little bit of a wobbly Mercer bunch. I do think that they get the job done here. They've been pretty solid in terms of their overall offensive efficiency. They're only turned the ball over 10.5 times per game, but that said, I do think that Georgia State getting now fully healthy with Hamilton, deal with an injury, that is going to be able to help out their offensive numbers. I did some, I total here at a 151. Here at a 153, I'm going to be willing to go under Georgia State, clocking in outside the top 2 in terms of total possessions per game, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Georgia State. 619, 620 on the card. It is Rhode Island, and they play us Brown. What can Brown do for you? Well, if they don't get blown out in this game, they'll make you money. They're 12.5 to 13-point underdogs. So on this game, it is 137, and I did some I told you here at a 144.5. I do like the over. You've got a Brown team that is really playing slowly. They're outside the top 250 in terms of possessions per 40 minutes, but that said, you've got a Rhode Island team that they've been pretty efficient on the offensive side of things. They're not playing at the same tempo that they did a season ago. Currently, they're checking in about 307th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they've done a better job in terms of finding their bearings on offense with only turning the ball over about 11.5 times per game. They themselves a top 85 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they've been a top 55 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. Tyler Cochran, Jonah Hinton, these two guys have been able to come in. They've been able to combine for about 32 points per game. Cochran was a really nice scorer 2 years ago over at Toledo, and he's right now generating 4 steals per game as well. And then you've got Miles Corey. He's come in from the Sun Belt. He's been able to give you about 10.5 points per game. It's a Rhode Island team that has been playing pretty much even up on the glass, not necessarily doing a great job there, not necessarily doing a bad job. And then Landon Lewis is going to be having it up to him to be able to hold in there down low for Brown, as he was missing for the first few games of the season. But ever since he's come back, he's been able to give the team 14.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. And then you've got Nafara Dabo, who's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. This team is really missing that just explosiveness in the backcourt from a season ago. They had that with Keno Lilly giving you about 19 points per game, but you've been able to have Adrian Ochaduno, who's been able to give you about 11 points per contest. Not shooting it great from 3, but the ancillary guys like Jeremiah Jenkins, Brady Laughlin have been able to shoot 40+% from 3-point. And ever since Landon Lewis has gone back in the fold, it's been much better for this Brown team offensively. Now, the defense has also been very stymieing, as they have allowed each of their last 2 opponents to score 53 points or fewer, and they've held 3 of their last 4 opponents to 53 points or fewer. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of negative regression there. Numbers were a little bit warped by the double overtime game against Vermont, but for Brown, they are having a little bit of tough time on the glass. Outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots, that result in an offensive rebound, and I do think that with Brown, turn the ball over about 14 times per game, the way that Rhode Island is able to generate those turnovers, that they're going to be able to do a nice job on that front. I set Rhode Island as a 12.5 point favorite. At 13, I do think that the return of Landon Lewis is just enough for Brown to hold in there, but I do think that Rhode Island is going to do a nice job in terms of finding some efficiency on offense. I do like the over, and I'm willing to take 13 plus here with Brown. 621, 622 on the card. Butler is playing us Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan, a 17.5 to an 18-point dog. 152 is the total, and I set Butler as a 20.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Eastern Michigan, a nice triumph over Cincinnati a week or so ago, but it's still an Eastern Michigan team that I'm just not super bullish on. Defense is much better. They're now inside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you did have compound transfers. 2 guys that come over from Northwestern State. Edison Patterson, a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. He's right now shooting 44% from 3 after he wasn't great from 3 last year. John Sanders was great from 3 last year. He's now shooting 32% from 3. He's supplying the team with 9 points per game, but it's been all about Mohamed Mahab, who's been able to give you about 15.5 points, 9.5 boards, 3.5 assists, comes over from Central Michigan, and he has been really lighting it up for the team, but still have an Eastern Michigan team that has been having a little bit of a difficult time taking care of the ball outside the top 225 in terms of their ball security, and this is a Butler squad that last year they were generating no turnovers whatsoever. Not to say that they're amazing this year, but they've climbed into the top 225 with this regard, and their 3-point shooting has been great. They're shooting 39.5% from the outside. Finley Bizjack, he's back in the system, and he's been able to give you 17.5 points. He's shooting 42% from three. Michael Ajayi has never been able to find that three-point shooting pop that he had over at Pepperdine, but the guy is just absolutely a matrix, filling up every column of the stat sheet. 12 boards, 3.5 assists, 16 points per game, and then Jamie Kaiser, Jalen Jackson, both have been able to shoot 40+% from three. They're combined for 20 points per game. Yohan Traore is able to do a nice job on the glass. Butler needs to clean up the fact that they're shooting 65% of the free throw line, but if they are in a position where they've got late game fouling, they're not going to be covering this summer anyway. And for Butler, they've allowed teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. Really not been a lot of fouling in their games either, as this team has done a great job in terms of keeping teams off the free throw line. It's an Eastern Michigan team that I think is going to have a tough time being able to hold up on the glass against a Butler team that's been a top 35 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Did set a total of a 150.5. I recognize that this Butler team has really ascended with regards to their tempo. Eastern Michigan, though, they're not a team that's going to be looking to fly. About 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Butler more around about 33rd, but I do think that part of that for Butler was the competition that they played to begin the season. So set a total of a 150.5 at the 152. I like the under animal and lay of Butler. 623, 624 on the card. Wake Forest is going to be playing us to Oklahoma, and Boomer Sooner finds themselves as a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. 157.5 to 158.5 is the total. I did set a line of 2.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Oklahoma. With Wake Forest, this offense is much cleaner than it was a season ago. You tell that they were really missing Kevin Boopy Miller a season ago, but they've now found a man that has done a nice job in terms of doling it out, Nate Kalmezi. Now, I wonder how long lasting this is going to be, as over at Washington and Washington State he had turnover issues, but 5.6 turnovers, so 1.5 turnovers per game. You're going to take that. He's been able to give the team 8 points per game and just really balanced shooting up and down the boulevard. Among your top 5 scorers, 4 of them shoot between 34.6 and 37% for three. Trevon Spillers is the lone outlier. He's a 6'8" big man that is a little bit more there for his shot blocking, a block, a steal and a half, 6.5 rebounds per game. And Juke Harris has been great, 19.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. This Oklahoma team is going to have a little bit of tough time on the glass. Wake Forest has been a top 75 unit with regards to rebound percentage, but this is also an Oklahoma team that has very good veteran guards, as you bring over Nigel Pack from Miami, part of that Final Four team from a season ago, along Xavier Brown from St. Joe's, and Mr. Brown is able to give you 3.5 assists, right around 14 points per game. Pack has packed it in with 3 assists, and right now he's shooting 50% from three with about 19 points per contest. Again, team is probably going to take it on the chin a little bit more down low, but Tay Davis, who comes over from Notre Dame at Seton Hall, 2.5 assists, 8 boards, 13 points. Love what he's able to bring to the table. You've got Muhammad Wagyu, who's got good size with a block and a half, 6.5 rebounds per game. Not necessarily the world's greatest amount of depth with Oklahoma. You could use someone like a cool Atok to be able to step it up, and they've been dealing with the injury to Jadon Jones, but still, for this Oklahoma team, they're a relatively mid-tempo team. Last year, they were one of the best three-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball. Right now, teams are shooting over 36% from three against them. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity there, but also for Oklahoma, only about 9 turnovers per game. That's been a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, and I do think that Oklahoma does a good job of being able to hold in there. And what I think is going to be a little bit more of a mid-tempo game. I said my total at 150.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under and those points with Oklahoma. 625, 626 on the card. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced. I have no idea why this NEC game is in the normal Las Vegas betting board, but they put it here. They're on the road against Providence, and Providence is a 27 to a 29.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 167, and set a total here of a 162.5. I'm in on the under. Now, Fairleigh Dickinson traditionally is a team that's just absolutely wretched down low, and they're typically a team that likes to gun it, and it's not like Fairleigh Dickinson is playing slow, but they have slowed themselves down a little bit. 143rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and got a Providence team that's just flat out playing too fast for their own good. 15th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's yielding bad defensive results right now. Providence well outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I was joking they should rename themselves Province because there's no D right now, but that said, down low you have been able to have Oswin, can't pronounce the last name, give you about 3 blocks per contest, 7.5 boards. He's been playing a little bit of defense along with Ryan Mella, who's been able to give you 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, a steal and a half, 10 points per game. Nice versatility there. They had Jason Edwards come off the bench in their last game. I'm not sure why he and Jalen Sellers have been able to combine for 33.5 points per game. Neither are great 3-point shooters, though, so that's a little bit of a problem. Now, I did set Providence as a 28.5 point favorite because Fairleigh Dickinson, it just feels like is going through a little bit too much change right now. Fairleigh Dickinson, when they made the NCAA tournament, knocked out Purdue, they were famously one of the small teams in all of college basketball. Now they're really running things between the 7-footer and Cyril Martinoff, who's been able to give you about 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Arthur Cox at 6'8" has been Tulane will give you about 9 points per contest as well. They're really looking for their bearings with regards to their outside shooting. Joey Niesman has been able to give you 3.5 assists, 8 points per contest. Fairleigh Dickinson only shooting about 31.5% from three, way down with their standards, outside the top 250 in terms of ball security as well. And they're just getting blowtorch from three. They're allowing teams to shoot 38.5% from three-point range. It has been a Fairleigh Dickinson team that's just not been very efficient with regards to their overall scoring, outside the top 250 in terms of 2-point shooting and their 3-point shooting. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game, because the just narrative around Fairleigh Dickinson is that they play super duper fast. They've changed things around a little bit more this year, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. So I told more around a 160 at 2.5, and with Providence, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 28 with them. 627, 628 on the card. This is from the Merrill Center, a neutral court game between South Alabama and New Mexico State. New Mexico State is a 2-point favorite. This game is a whopping 133.5, and set a total of a 134. So 133.5 is my max buy point on the over, but it is a buy point on the over. For South Alabama, just one of the most unique styles that you're going to find. They are just daring teams to take it from three. Teams are attempting over 60% of their field goal attempts from three-point range. I just think that they're going to be nipped in the bud at some point. Now, still a rock-solid team in terms of generating turnovers, top 150 team here. And with regards to their overall rebounding, they've been a top 150 team in terms of rebound percentage as well. This team just does a great job of finding these U2 guys that fit the system. Peyton Laws come in. He's been able to give the team 13 points. 6 boards per contest. You've got Chaz Harris, Adam Olson, both giving you about 15.5 points per game. It's a South Alabama team that, on offense, they're not a great three-point shooting team. They're not a bad three-point shooting team. They're shooting about 34% from the outside. Certainly, they're not necessarily super imposing down low, as their block shot rate is one of the worst in all of college basketball, but they've also done a great job in terms of just keeping things clean as well. Even though this South Alabama team, outside the top three in terms of total possessions per game, only 8.5 turnovers per game, and this New Mexico State team has very much formed themselves around defense under Coach Jason Newton, and darn tootin', it's been Jamel Jones who's been the main headline scorer for them, just like he was over at Cal State Bakersfield 8 seasons ago. 16 points, 5 boards. He's right now only shooting about 32% from three, but you've had Jalen Randall come over from Southern Indiana. He's been able to get the team about 8 points per game. You've got a team that's really good on the glass, with Julius Mims being that top rebounder, 8.5 rebounds after he was rock solid over at Idaho 8 seasons ago. Sierra Malanga gives you size. He gives you 4 boards. Steen Ikwe has been able to give you like 4.5 rebounds per game. So even though you don't have a lot of explosive scores or anything like that, just a really good defensive team. And this team also does a good job of daring you to shoot from three. And right now teams are shooting just 24% from distance against them. So it's a very interesting circumstance. I do think that for New Mexico State, they are going to have a nice little bit of advantage on the glass. And that's why I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Neither of these teams necessarily shoot it great from three, but I do think that you get just enough 3-point shooting and some late game following for the over. But that said, I think that South Alabama takes good enough care of the ball to be able to cover this number. Semi-line at 2, so I'm now seeing a 3.5 out there. Going to be able to take the points with South Alabama, and 133.5 or less in on the over. So 629, 630 on the card. It is Drake, and they play as Western Illinois. The Drake is a 17.5 point favorite. Total game is 137.5. Semi-line at 14.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Western Illinois. With Western Illinois, this unit has been in a lot of transition, and they like to play super slow. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game once again this season, and you got a Drake team as well outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, but it just feels like this is a Western Illinois team that is getting back to what made them successful 2 years ago. Good low post play, and that started with bringing in Isaiah Griffin from Idaho State. 11 points, 5 boards per contest, currently shooting 53% from three-point range. That'll be going downward, but I team overall is shooting 36.5% from three. You've had Francis Okuswa be able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Even someone like Kavik Dixon has been able to give you about 4.5 boards per contest. So these guys have been able to do a rock solid job there. Western Illinois, never a great team in generating turnovers, back outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but that said, doing a good job on the glass to be able to keep themselves lively in these games. And for Drake, this is a team in quite a bit of transition as you bring in Eric Henderson, who last season was a very good coach over at South Dakota State, and he's been able to have some guys that have been able to really own the glass as well. Wilkins Exacte has been able to give you 10.6 rebounds per game, and Oku Frederico about 13.7 rebounds per game as well. Drake, hit or miss with regards to their offense. They're well outside the top 125 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but well inside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, albeit they've been a little bit lucky. Teams against them are shooting 59.4% the free throw line, so that's a little bit of an issue. And for Drake, even though they're not a great shooting team, they're efficient. They're only turning the ball over about 9 times per game, which is something that you do like to see. Jalen Quinn, who's come over from Loyola Chicago, has really been the guy that has run the offense. 4 assists, 17.5 points, and he's shooting only about 26% from 3. As again, you just don't have a lot of great 3-point shooting outside. Deshaun Thomas shooting 38% from the outside. He's been able to give the team 10.5 points per game. It's a relatively thin rotation right now that Drake has, but they sort of know what they've got with it, and they're playing very slow, so it's a fascinating circumstance here. I did set my total at a 138.5. I do think that you get just enough 3-point shooting from Western Illinois to go over, and I do think that Drake, with the way that they take care of the ball, even though they're slow, they execute just enough for the over, so like the over and the points with Western Illinois. 631, 632 on the card. It is Florida. They're on the road against Duke. Duke is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 156 to 156.5. I did set Duke as an 8.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them. For Florida, the backcourt play just looks to be a little bit disjointed right now. They were a skoge a bit better in that final game out there in the great state of California when they got the job done against Providence, but Providence is playing no defense whatsoever. And I would say Urban Klavzar is right now your best guard for Florida. The guy is shooting 38% from 3, 10.5 points, not necessarily too much of a facilitator, but off the ball, he has been really nice. And right now for this Florida team, you've had Boogie Flang give you 12 points, 2.5 assists, but he's shooting 24% from 3. Xavion Lee does not look comfortable out there. 9 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, so he does a bit of everything. He's shooting 22% from 3-point. Just Florida team, still one of the best teams in all of college basketball on the glass. A top 20 team in terms of rebound percentage. Thomas Haw, 8 rebounds, 17.5 points per game. He's shooting about 31% from 3. Alex Condon should probably stop taking threes, but 9 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, a block, 15.5 points per game. Micah Handlogden has been able to give you 7+ rebounds per game. Ruben Chinyelu is giving you 11 rebounds per game. So you've got size upon size, but I don't know how well they're going to be able to match up with Mr. Boozer, Cameron Boozer, as you've got 2 Boozers actually, because Caden Boozer, a little bit more of an ancillary piece who comes off the bench to actually give the team 3.5 assists per game, but Cameron Boozer is right now looking like one of the most complete players in all of college basketball. 23 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, a block per contest while shooting 39% from 3-point range. Just absolutely ridiculous what we've seen there. Caleb Foster's right now shooting 48% from 3. That'll be going downward. Isaiah Evans right now shooting 35% from 3. I would say that goes up, considering he shot 42% from 3, but Evans and Foster, between the two of them, about 22.5 points per contest. Just really good facilitation by committee for the Duke team. They do a nice job in terms of not turning it over. They're a top 75 team in terms of ball security. They're right now in the top 25 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and Florida's looking to gun it, while Duke is not necessarily the most up-tempo team in the world. Duke a little bit faster, actually, than a season ago. They're clocking in 181st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Florida's at 27th. I do think that this is going to be a game where the defensive efficiency is going to be just good enough for the under. Duke, they always have been under John Shire, a really nice offensive team, and I think that wins out. Florida has good low post play, but I mean, still, you've got the guys like a Patrick Ngongba down low who's been able to give you for the Duke team 6.5 boards, a block per contest. Obviously, the Boozer brothers, Dame Sarr has good versatility. I think that Duke is going to be able to do a solid job from within, and the guard play leads them to victory. So, one to lay up to 8 here with Duke. I'm in on the underside by total 154.5. 633, 634 on the card. It is Baylor. They play host to Sacramento State, and old Sacramento State is a 29.5 to a 27.5 point dog. 158 is the total, and it's a total of 151.5. I'm in on the under. For Sacramento State, I recognize that this has been a pretty ghastly defense outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not really too much of an up-tempo team, 140th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you're not getting a bunch here that's running it and gunning it with Baylor. Are they playing fast? Sure, about 134th in terms of total possessions per game. That's hardly above average, and for Baylor, certainly you've got some very efficient offense. They are lacking a little bit on the defensive side of things with Jocelyn Bodu currently being out of the fold. They have yet to have Andre Iguodala take the floor as well. Andre Iguodala the second, because that's the son, but that said, for this bunch, you've had Cameron Carr be one of the more explosive scorers in college basketball thus far. 22.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and they're doing a great job of rebounding by committee, as right now you've got 4 separate guys who have been able to give you at least 5.2 rebounds per game. This bunch has been a top 50 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and for Baylor, they're actually outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I just don't know if Sacramento State's going to be able to take advantage of that. Tande Yusufu has been rock solid for this Baylor team as well, give you about 15.5 points per game. For a Baylor team that's shooting about 36% from 3, with Carr shooting 55% from 3, and everyone else has been sort of hit or miss. And then for Sacramento State, Prophet Johnson, well, he's been the prophet of leading the way for this team. 15 points, 8 boards, 4 assists per game, and And then Jeremiah Jerry has done a nice job down low. He's been able to supply the team with about 15.5 points, a little bit over 8 rebounds per game, but he has been out since the UCLA game. He's probably not going to be able to play in this game. You do have Mikey Williams, a former top 75 recruit, who's been able to supply 13 points per game as well, but the backcourt play has really left something to be desired other than running things through Williams, who's very much a heat check guy. You don't necessarily have a lot of facilitation with this group. It's a Sacramento State team that has been outside the top 175 in terms of ball security, actually doing a nice job blocking shots, but much of that has been thanks to Jeremiah Jerry. He's right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, and I do think that as a result, this Baylor team should be able to go out there, get the job done. I do think that the 29.5 is a little bit too far, especially with Baylor having some hits or misses on defense as well, but I also do think that the total's too high, especially with Sacramento State outside the top 330 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, set a total here of a 151.5. I like the under and the points here with Sacramento State at 28 plus, 635, 636 on the card. Northern Illinois is going to be playing outside of Lindenwood, and Lindenwood does find themselves as a 5 to a 5.5 point underdog. 146 and 148 is the total, and with Lindenwood, well, I set them as 1.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. It's a Lindenwood squad that last year was a top 70 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're doing a pretty sturdy job once again this year. Lindenwood was just terrible from three-pointers last year, and they're pretty terrible once again, shooting 28.5% from three outside the top 320 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. They've been better on the offensive glass, a top 175 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, as Jadis Jones, who's back from a season ago, 16.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal per contest. He's done a nice job there. You've got Aeneas Futrell, who returns from a season ago with about 12 points, 4.5 boards. So, I mean, these guys have been able to deliver the goods, and then Dontrez Williams has been a guy that's been a little bit in and out of the lineup. When he's been in there, he's been able to shoot about 36% from three. He's applying a little bit over 10 points per game, and he should be good to go in this game. He missed the first 2 games before returning for the squad, so that's an encouraging sign for them. And then on the other end, for Northern Illinois, you just have a team that they don't grab second and third chances. They just don't have a lot of size down low. And for Northern Illinois, they are outside the top 225 in terms of offensive rebound percentage after they were outside the top 360 8 seasons ago. Much improved with their offense because the shooting on this team is quite good. Their shooting is a collective 37.5% from three, with Dylan Duquesne, who's been able to come in from overseas, give the team 13 points, shooting about 43% from three, being that main guy, and it's also giving you a little bit over 4 assists per contest as well. It is a Northern Illinois team that's slowed down their tempo from a season ago. Last year, they were a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. This year, they're checking in more in the neighborhood of like 270th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. This is a Lindenwood team that has really sped themselves up. Last year, they were a pretty up-tempo team, but this year, they're actually 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I attribute that a little bit more to the competition that they've been playing. I do think that J.J. Taylor, if he's able to get out there on the floor, could be a little bit of an X factor for Northern Illinois as well. He's been able to give the team about 9 points per game. He's been at Central Florida, Memphis, but he's been missing for quite a while. Looks like he's probably going to be out of the fold once again, so that means that Jayotika really needs to be a creator for this team with about 10 points per contest. Is shooting 45% from 3-point, but the 14 turnovers per game for Northern Illinois, I think, are going to be a little bit of an issue. Did set Northern Illinois as a 1.5 point favorite, so I'm not going to quite go money line here on Lindenwood, but I'm going to be willing to take those points with them, and I did set a total of 147.5, as I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a few possessions in this game, so at the 146 in on the over. 637, 638 on the card. It is Marquette. They play us at Valparaiso, and Valparaiso is a 17.5 to an 18-point dog. Total on this game between 145.5 to a 146.5, and with Marquette, I did set them as a favorite of 22 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I'm just not a believer in this Valparaiso team. Maybe it's just me being a hater or something like that, but I just don't see a lot of very good here. Or Akeem Chaney has been very solid. He's been able to give the team 14 points, 3.5 assists per game, shooting 47% from three. We should see a little bit of regression there, and he's the only guy on the roster that's giving you over 10 points per game. You've got 2 guys in Sean Tupula and JT Pettigrew, who have been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per game. Both give you about 8.5 points per contest, but the team as a whole shoots 30% from three. Valparaiso actually does an exceptional job taking care of the ball. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They grab offensive rebounds. They just can't shoot to save their lives. They're outside the top 335 in 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 300 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, and with regards to defense, they're pretty pedestrian on both sides of things. They've been able to generate a few turnovers, and well, you want to talk about pedestrian, Marquette has not been great to say the least. Maybe they should be entering into the transfer portal to find a few guys, because Chase Ross has been great. He's been able to give you 21 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. Right now shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point, but there's not a lot around him. Nigel James was able to bust out over the weekend, 11 points, 3.5 assists per game. I like that. And for Marquette, top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced, force on a per possession basis, but just not a lot down low. They have been a top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they do allow opponents to be able to grab quite a few second and third chances as well. But Valparaiso lost a lot of their size with the likes of Jerome Palm and company transferring out in the offseason, and I do think that Marquette, who's right now allowing teams to shoot over 35% from three, while they themselves shoot 31% from the outside, they see that iron out a little bit. So I did set Marquette here as a favorite of 22.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay that number in. I did set a total of a 148. You do have a Marquette team that is relatively mid-tempo thus far this season. Valparaiso has really not been running and gunning it, about 234th in terms of total possessions per game, but do think that Marquette gets online with their three-point shooting, so like the over and willing to lay with Marquette. 639, 640 on the card. Loyola Chicago, they're going to be playing out to Central Michigan. Central Michigan is an underdog of 5.5 to 6 points on this game, between 143.5 to 144. Going to continue to fade Loyola Chicago here. I'm taking the points with Central Michigan, set them as a 3.5 point underdog. These are just two programs going in the opposite direction. Loyola Chicago is miring mediocrity in a season that was supposed to honor Sister Jean. This has just been a big, giant disgrace for these guys. Andy Brockma, meanwhile, for Central Michigan, he's got these guys, many of which came up from the non-Division I level, like Tamario Adley, Logan McIntyre, playing some good basketball. Adley has been your main facilitator, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 10 points per game. It's a whole square than the sum of its parts roster, as your main scorer right now is Nathan Clearbot, who he's a through 7-footer, comes up for the D2 level, 11.5 points, 7.5 boards, not a guy that pops up from three, but hey, you've got 7 guys right now who are supplying at least 7 points per game, 8 guys that give you at least 6.5 points per game. So they've done a great job being able to play by committee. The squad is a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Need to clean up the 14 turnovers per game, but Loyola Chicago has not been good on defense. They've not been good on offense. They're outside the top 225 in both respects, and for Loyola Chicago, they're just getting plastered on the glass. They're allowing opponents to grab 12.5 offensive rebounds per game. They're outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and typically this team would not grab a lot of offensive rebounds, but they wouldn't let you grab offensive rebounds either. Now they're letting you grab those rebounds. They're allowing teams to shoot 40% from three. Maybe a little bit of that is bad luck, but they themselves are shooting outside the top 330 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. 45.8% is right now outside the top 330. This squad has just been rudderless and strange. Miles Rubin is still solid down low, 3 blocks, 6.5 boards, 12 points per game, and DeWilk Tavares, who comes over from Charleston, shooting 35% from three, but hey man, this is just not great because they don't generate any turnovers. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. That allows Central Michigan to be able to keep it clean, and that allows Central Michigan to be able to hold in this game. You do have a Central Michigan team that has not really been playing up tempo, and it's a little Chicago team that over the last few years, they've been a little bit more up, down, all around in terms of their tempo. Well, Chicago right now, 355th in terms of total possessions per game. That's Porter Mosier 2.0 right there. And then for the Central Michigan team, they've been hovering more in that neighborhood, about 282nd. Central Michigan leaves a little bit of something to be desired with their defense, but I think they hold in there, and I think that you get some late game fouling. I said my total 145.5. I like the over and the points with Central Michigan. 641, 642 on the card. UT Arlington, they're on the road against Arkansas State, and Arkansas State finds themselves as a mid-tier favorite here of about 4 to 4.5 points total on this game, between 151.5 to 152.5. Set Arkansas State as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. The big issue that you've got with UT Arlington is taking care of the ball outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and now you go up against an Arkansas State team that, yeah, they're only generating about 12 turnovers per game, but this has been an Arkansas State squad that just has felt like it's found their bearings a little bit more. You've got a lot of transfers that have come in, and Ryan Pannone, he was an assistant over at Alabama last year. He's in his first year as the team's coach. Now, Arkansas State, they themselves outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but you do have a pair of teams that I believe are going to be looking to fly. Arkansas State might not be at warp speed right now, but I mean, they're 39th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you got a UT Arlington squad right now that's more around about 240th. Last year, they were in the top 150. I think that they're going to be ascending a little bit more. We've noticed that Arlington has been a little bit more up, down, all around, but that's up for this Arkansas State team. Chandler Jackson has been able to give you 12 points. He's been rock solid coming over from Florida State. Have to believe that you're going to see some positivity with the team shooting 28.6% from three-pointers right now. Your top 5 scorers are all shooting 30.4% from three or worse, and I mean, these are guys who are able to pop it for three. Kyle Heyman, he comes on over from Stephen F. Austin, where he was that team's top scorer last year, 9.5 points per game. Christian Arman is giving you 10 points per game. TJ Caldwell, who was over at Ole Miss, he's right now giving you about 12 points per contest as well. And then on the other side of things, you've got an Arlington team that really had to replace everyone sans Rayshawn Semester from a season ago. Semester, he's been really the main scorer for the team, 17 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game. He's not necessarily an explosive three-point shooter, but Marcel McCreary, Gregory, who comes over from Northern Colorado, is 11.5 points, shooting 43% for 3, 2.5 assists per contest, like what he's able to bring to the table. And then you've got Tyron Mason, who I think is a little bit of an upside guy. He's giving you 7 points per game after last season. He was over at North Texas. His minutes have been sort of sporadic, as he had a 19-point game against Evansville a few weeks ago, and the last 3 games he scored a combined 5 points. You just don't know what you're going to get out of this UT Arlington team, and for Arlington, they have been able to do a nice job generating second and third chances. Top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're forcing everything to the inside. This Arlington team is a top 10 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range, but I believe that with Arkansas State shooting it so badly from 3 that that's actually a good thing for them. So I just set a total of 158.5. I think that Arkansas State is going to look to run and gun here. I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Arkansas State, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. 643, 644 on the card. Bradley plays us Washington State. Washington State an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog. 158 to 158.5 is a total, and did set a total of 154.5. I'm in on the under. It's a Washington State team that's looking to fly, top 75 unit in terms of total possessions per game. This is a Bradley team that's not looking to fly, as Brian Wardle's squad is taking a step back with their 3-point shooting, and as a result, they're now 271st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I do think that there's reason to believe that Bradley is going to get a little bit more online with their 3-point shooting, as a squad that they were really rough to begin the season last year. They were a top 5 team with regards to their 3-point shooting, but Alex Hubagerste has now been able to come in for Bright State, give you 12 points. He's shooting about 40% from 3, and Jaquan Johnson, your main returner from a season ago, 3.3 steals, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, 19 points on 40% 3-point shooting. Demarion Birch was a rock-solid scorer last season. He's been able to give you about 37% 3-point shooting. Corey Thomas is right now shooting only about 21% from 3 after that was more around 37+% 8 seasons ago, but it does also feel like Bradley's getting back to their just roots of being able to rebound. You've got a 7'1" big man in Yonet Janovic, who's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. He's become a bigger and bigger part of the offense as the season has went along, but for Washington State, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up, because the big thing for Washington State is having clean offense. This team has been turned the ball over about 12.5 times per game after last year. They're outside the top 3 in terms of ball security, but here's what Washington State is doing well. You are not getting second and third chances off of them. They are allowing 6.4 offensive rebounds per game. That is numero uno in all of college basketball. And for Washington State, they're a solid 3-point shooting team. They're shooting 34.9% from the outside. Ace class. There better be some sort of a car company that signs this guy up for some NIL. 17.5 points, 41.5% 3-point shooting. They needed a break glass when he had a 40-point game out there in Maui, so that was great. Amen Alo has been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. You don't necessarily have that like one great rebounder, even though teams are not getting second and third chances off of them. The only guy with more than 4.5 rebounds per game is Andy Okafor. Began his career at Cal. He's been able to give you about 10 points, block and half per contest. He's been rock solid there. You've had a few injuries with this team, but Rashad Varvers and Thomas Threadson, after missing a game or two, these guys are back. They're both giving you 10 points per game. I do believe that the travel is going to be a little bit rough for this squad, and Washington State is allowing teams to shoot 60% for 2. That's not amazing, but I think Washington State is able to hold in there in a little bit of a lower tempo game. So by total 154.5, like the under and the points here with Washington State. 645, 646 on the card. Oklahoma State plays us at Sam Houston, and Sam Houston does find themselves as an underdog of 13 to 14 points. 168 to 168.5 is the total, and set Oklahoma State as a 15.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 15 with them. Oklahoma State has become a top 110 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis after they were very inefficient a season ago. Turnovers are still killing them. They're outside the top 240 in terms of ball security, but you've been able to get some really good production out of Victorious Miller, 17.5 points, shooting over 50% from 3, and they've gotten a boost in the last 4 games with the return of Anthony Roy, who averaged over 25 points per game when he was over at UW Green Bay last season. You figured that wouldn't be lasting, but still, 14 points, mid-33 point shooter. Parsaf Allah comes over from Oregon State and Southern Utah, 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. It's an Oklahoma State team that's doing a much better job on the glass this year than a season ago. They become a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. And for Sam Houston, they are missing that main headline scorer from a season ago, but they've done a nice job in terms of being able to mix and match. As right now you're seeing Lamar Wilkerson really tear it up over at Indiana, but you've been having the whole is greater than some of its parts approach. As right now you've got 7 different players give between 8.9 and 11 points per game, including Po Boy King, who comes over from NC Central. He's helped out the backcourt with about 9 points per game. He's a little bit better than the less than steal per game that he's been able to generate, as your main guy in terms of the defensive side of things has been Kashi Knott, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 8 boards, 2 steals, a block per contest, doing a little bit of everything. Sam Houston taking a bit of a setback with their 3-point shooting from a season ago, but after getting totally barbecued from three-point range a season ago. Teams are shooting less than 30% from three. That should see a little bit of regression, but for Sam Houston, they're a top 30 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so they're grabbing about 15 offensive rebounds per game. Bottom 50 team in terms of allowing opponents to grab second and third chances as well. So good old situation of something's got to give. Sam Houston has reeled it in a little bit more with regards to turnovers, and it's the same Houston team that ever since Chris Mudge has taken over, they've had a little bit of just variance with regards to their styles. They're more of a mid-tempo team this year. As a matter of fact, about as mid-tempo as it gets, 167th in terms of total possessions per game. Oklahoma State is looking to fly number 4 in terms of total possessions per game. I think that this is going to be an up-tempo game, but I think we've got a little bit too far with this total. I do think that the turnovers do cost you that over. Somebody told 165.5, like the under, but for Oklahoma State, I do think that they find a way against the same Houston State that's team that is really still looking for that main guy, and they get the job done. We'll delay up to 15 with Oklahoma State. 647, 648 on the card. Morehead State is on the road against Murray State. Murray State is 16.5 to a 17-point favorite. Thought this game between 156.5 to a 157.5 and set total 153.5. I do like the under. Morehead State has their numbers a little bit warped in terms of their total possessions per game by the fact that they played against IU Indy over the weekend and actually held up halfway decent against IU Indy, by the way. Morehead State is now 87th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. That's because he had a whopper of a game against IU Indy. That number should be coming back down. Now, this Murray State team is looking to fly. 37th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It is a Murray State team that has been less than efficient with regards to their defense. I think is putting it very politely. As for Murray State, you've got Javon Jackson, who's been very good on the offensive side of things. 16 points, pair of assists, shooting 40% from three. Team as a whole, they're shooting 36% from the outside, but they've been outside the top 110 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and they're just allowing a lot of second and third chances. This team is outside the top 3 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so as a result, I could only set Murray State as more of a 15.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Morehead State. I do think that Morehead State, a team that typically prides itself on the glass, they're not necessarily the same team this year, that they're going to be able to do an okay job of holding up down low. You do have Frederick King for Murray State, who's missed a game or two. He's been able to give you 7+ rebounds per game, but that said, you've had John Carroll do a nice job caroling all the way to 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Nice low post presence to Maury Relaford. He comes over from West Georgia, 7.5 points, 5 boards. Not a guy that's going to light you up from 3, as Murray State really doesn't have a lot of guys to worry about in terms of the Morehead State 3-point shooting, but that said, for this Morehead State team, top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, bottom 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so their games are involving a lot of second and third chances. This Morehead State team has had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 285 in terms of ball security. You've got a Murray State team, though, that is not really forcing the issue too much in terms of generating turnovers, and for this Murray State team, they're looking to push teams inside. The opponent's 2-point shot rate is one of the highest in all of college basketball, so I do think that that's going to lead to a little bit of a lower scoring game, and that'll have Morehead State at home. I'm going to be willing to take the points for the Morehead State, so them as a 15.5-point underdog, and I do like the underside. I told 153.5, 649, 650 on the card. You've got Rutgers, they play us at Purdue, and Purdue finds themselves as 15.5 to 16-point favorites. So on this game between 145.5 to 146.5. I'm getting 16 points here at the rack with Rutgers, and I'm going to take them. It is one of the more difficult places to play in all of college basketball. Now, Rutgers not necessarily the team that we saw when they were making NCAA tournament a few seasons ago, but the NJIT transfer, and Tariq Francis has been rock solid. 13 points, 3 boards, 3 assists. Not a guy that's going to completely go guns blazing from 3-point range, but Dylan Grant has shot 44% from 3. He leads the way, 15.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Darren Buchanan, the George Washington transfer, I like him. He's been able to give you about 8.5 points per game. JaMychal Davis has been able to throw in their 9.5 points per contest as well. And this is a Rutgers team that they're still relatively solid on defense. They're a top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 100 team overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and neither of these teams are necessarily going to be looking to push a lot of tempo. Purdue last year was outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, and right now they're checking in 277th. Rutgers is 288th, so going to get a little bit more of a slog of a game. Now, for Purdue, top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got one of the best backcourts in all of college basketball, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer. These guys have been amazing. Smith has taken a little bit of setback with his scoring with only 13 points per game, but that's because he's only got 9 assists and a steal per game while shooting 38% from 3. Fletcher Lawyer shooting over 50% from 3 with 16 points per game, and Purdue has been one of the best rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. They bring in Oscar Clough. He's averaging a double-double, 12 points, 10 rebounds per game. Trey Kaufman-Renn, double-double, 15 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, and under the radar, the true 7-footer, he's actually closer to like 7'4". Daniel Jacobson has been able to give you 5 rebounds per game as well, but I think that Rutgers does a relatively okay job on the glass, and for this Rutgers team, they aren't going to have to worry about turning the ball over too much. Purdue is outside the top 3 in terms of generating turnovers, and I think that that's enough for this Rutgers team to be able to remain lively. So I did set my line at 13.5. Give me the points here at the rack. I did set a total of 143.5. Think that this is going to be a slog of a game, so I'm also going to be in on this total under 651, 652 on the card. Missouri is on the road against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a 1.5 point favorite to this game, between 149.5 to a 150.5. So Missouri is a 2.5 point favorite. I do like them outright on the money line. For Notre Dame, you do have Carson Tout down low. Has really been able to give this team some nice rough and tumble. He was over at Northern Arizona a season ago, and he's done a very rock solid job in terms of supplying this team with a little bit over 10 boards per game. Now, he's only giving you about 5.5 points per game, but you really don't need his offense because you've got Marcus Burton being the main headline scorer, giving 20 points, 2 assists, and then Brandon Shrewsbury has been able to shoot about 46% from 3. Cole Kurta has actually been able to give you some nice production as well with about 6.5 points per game, but a little bit of a top-heavy Notre Dame team. For Notre Dame, they're much better on the glass this season, top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they still do have their warts in terms of not being able to generate turnovers outside the top 250 with that regard. And you've got a Missouri team that typically they're very good at generating turnovers. They've taken a little bit of a half a setback this season because they've added a lot of size. So you've now got a true 7-footer in Sean Phillips, who's been missing the last few games. I think that he's probably going to be out once again here, 9.5 points, 7 boards per contest. But Jaden Stone, Jacob Cruz, these two guys have been able to combine for 26 points. Between the two of them, 10 boards, and they're both shooting over 40% from 3. Mark Mitchell doesn't really pop it from 3, but at 6'7", 17 points, 6 boards, 3.5 assists per game. I absolutely love his game. You've had Unner Boateng be able to give you about 8 points per game. Just have so much size and versatility. Javon Porter, the brother of Michael Porter, has been able to come in 6'11". He shoots some threes, 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And for Dennis Gates' team, they're allowing nothing easy inside. Top 35 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And while Missouri is known as being a 3-point shooting team, and they're shooting 39% from 3, they're a top 10 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage as well. Missouri, once again, back in the top 25 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And Missouri's not necessarily playing at warp speed. Notre Dame typically plays very slowly. Notre Dame currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in more in the neighborhood of about 315th in all of college basketball. Missouri, though, about 105th, but they just execute their stuff. I think that they get the job done here. Set my line at 2.5. I like Missouri as the very, very small underdog on the money line, and I like the over as well. 653, 654 on the card is Ole Miss playing us to Miami. Miami is a 4.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 146.5 to a 147.5, and I set a total here in the mid 150s. I set a total of 156. I do like the over with Miami. This is a team that's looking to run, maybe not necessarily completely fly, but in terms of total possessions per game, they're about 116th in all of college basketball. And they both have been top 65 teams in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Ole Miss, top 65 team in terms of ball security, and I do think that they're going to do a good job against a Miami team that's been really dominating down low. Ernest Uday has been able to give 8+ rebounds per game. Malik Renew, he's right now doing everything, 20+ points, 8+ rebounds. He's able to pop it from 3, but I did set this Ole Miss team as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Does feel like the backcourt is starting to find their bearings because Giffo comes over from the Big South, has been able to give you 8.5 points per game. Elias Carmadine has been really your main guy, 15 points, 4.5 assists, international man of mystery. Is right now shooting 39.5% from 3-point range. And then you've got an Ole Miss team that they just do such a great job in terms of keeping things out in front of them and winning the possession battle, as they've been able to be a top 125 team in terms of rebound percentage. Now Miami's going to have a little bit of a leg up with that regard, and for Miami, you've got Drew Washington and Trey Donaldson in the backcourt, combining for about 29 points per game. With Drew Washington, last year shot 40% from 3 over at New Mexico. This year, he's shooting about 38% from the outside, and to the credit of Miami, top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've been a little bit lucky on defense, though. Opponents are shooting 61% at the free throw line against them. That's certainly going to be going northward, and for Miami, they're looking to pile drive the ball a little bit more inside. Their outside shooting has been relatively okay, but this is a team that their 2-point shot rate is in the top 75 in all of college basketball, and they're a top 75 team with regards to that 2-point shooting percentage. So very interesting circumstance here. You've got good depth with both of these teams. AJ Storr seems to be back to being a little bit more efficient than he was a season ago over at Kansas. Set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay with Ole Miss, and here with this total, I think you're close enough for late game felling. Set my total at 156. I'm in on the over. 655, 656 on the card. Pepperdine is going to be playing us Abilene Christian, and Abilene Christian does find themselves as a pick 'em to a 1.5 point dog. 135.5 is the total, and for Pepperdine, Pepperdine, I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number for Abilene Christian. The hallmark of this team is always generating turnovers. This is back to being a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis after they were number 1 in all of college basketball last season, but you lose your top 2 scorers from a season ago, so Braden Hubbard has had to do it all on offense. 16.5 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists, 2 steals, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Nobody else is giving you more than 8.7 points per game, and nobody else is giving you more than 4.5 to 5 or so rebounds per game, and that typically is the way that this Abilene Christian team is, but they could use a little bit more than one guy, over 9 points per game. And for Pepperdine, this team has a lot of new pieces, but they have found a nice point guard in Silas Phipps, who began his career over at Grand Canyon, 11 points, 6 boards, 6 assists per game, and then Javon Cooley, 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. He was rock solid over at Marist many years ago, and for Pepperdine, they're actually doing the little things really well. They're shooting 78.5% the free throw line. They're a top 55 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage of their missed shots that do become an offensive rebound. I've had a little bit of a tough time down low outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're middle of the road in taking care of the ball. About 12.5 turnovers per game, but the versatility of 6'10" Daniil Dozic, I think, is very good. He's been able to give the team just under 12 points per game. Shoots about 36.5% from 3-point range. I expect a little bit more of Yatan Levy, who he was a player that was playing professional basketball over there in Turkey a few seasons ago, and he's been a little bit more of a this and that sort of guy, but do think that in the end, you are going to be able to have this Pepperdine team get the job done at home. And I do think that for this Pepperdine team, they're going to be looking to play relatively mid-tempo this year. You've got an Abilene Christian team that they're always a little bit all over the place with their tempo. This year, they're a little bit slower, 251st in the country. In terms of total possessions, Brain Pepperdine more around about 155th. So I did set a total here of a 146.5. I'm going to be willing to take Pepperdine as a very slim favorite. And with regards to this total, right now, we're seeing that at a 135.5. That's very low, so I'm going to be taking a shot on that total over 657, 658 on the card. It is Kansas. They are going to be playing against Connecticut. UConn does find themselves as a favorite of between 1.5 to 2.5 points. Total on this game is between 140.5 to 141.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number here with UConn. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. You still have the injury to Darren Peterson that is really ailing this Kansas team. It's going to be interesting to see when he's going to be able to come back. And for this UConn squad, they've just been really good on the defensive side of things once again this year. Teams are shooting only about 25.5% for 3, albeit it's against a lot of outgoing competition. But now you're getting Terrence Reed back in the fold as well. He missed 3 games, and he wasn't quite 100% in their game against Illinois, but he provided a spark. He was right now give the team 8 rebounds, 15.5 points per game. Just having to back out there on the floor and give you 2 blocks per game. That helps this team out. It's a UConn team that's not really looking to run it and gun it. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. In Kansas, they're now outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game as well. But for UConn, just a lot of offensive efficiency. They're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per game. One of the best teams in terms of ball security. Solo ball, 14 points, and he's only shooting 24.5% from 3. That's not going to continue all season long. Silas Emery shooting 27.5% from 3. That's not going to continue all season long. 12.6 assists out of him, and Malachi Smith, it took him a little bit of time to be able to get his bearings with the offense, and he's not a primary scorer right now, 7 points per game, but he's come off the bench. He's given the team 4 assists per game. He's actually shooting 56% from 3-point range, and the offense for Kansas has really been ailing, the defense is fine. They're a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not grabbing a lot of offensive rebounds, and that's where Terrence Reed coming back is going to be big, but Flory Badunga down low has been able to give you 2.5 blocks per game, so even though this team is not great on the offensive glass, they're good with regards to their interior defense, top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, not allowing a lot of second and third chances themselves, and those blocks have been massive. But we've also got a Kansas team that without Peterson, they're not generating a lot of turnovers. This team is the bottom 15 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. The backcourt is mainly consisting of Trey White, who's been able to give 14.5 points, 6.5 boards, does a little bit of everything, shooting 43.5% from 3. And Melvin Council has done a nice job in terms of going out good clean offense, 5.3 assists, 1.3 turnovers per game, 11 points per game. He's right now shooting a paltry 16% from 3-point range. Cole Rosario has had to step up, give the team 6.5 points per game. Bryson Tiller at 6'10" is able to pop it from 3, 9.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but you tell that oomph is missing. Marco Jackson has just not been able to give you too much with only about 4.5 points per game. I do think that UConn is going to be able to take it to a Kansas team that's a little bit short-handed, and Kansas is looking to make games ugly, and I think that this is going to be an uglier game. I did set my total at a 140.5. I like the under, but UConn, I think, gets the job done. Willing to lay up to 2 with them at the Fog. 659, 660 on the card. It is Georgia. They're on the road against Florida Florida State. Seminoles find themselves as a slight home underdog here, as you're going to be catching 2 to 2.5 points with them. 171.5 to 172.5 is the total, and with Florida State, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. I'm going to be one to take a shot here on Georgia with this Georgia unit. They have been really having a lot of success despite the fact that they can't shoot it from 3 to save their lives, and I don't think that Georgia is going to be shooting 40+% from 3 all season long, but I have to think that the 30.2% three-point shooting goes northward. Jeremiah Wilkerson, who comes over from Cal, has been very rock solid, 16.5 points. He's right now shooting 35% from 3. You've been able to get good rebounding by committee. Now, they allow a lot of second and third chances on the glass. They're outside the top 300 with regards to defensive rebound percentage, but a top 55 team in terms of grabbing their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and they've been great down low. A top 15 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage, with having Jake Wilkins be able to come in and give you about 9.5 points per game. Blue Kane has been able to give 15 points. And right outside of Wilkins and Kane, you just have a lot of really nice ancillary guys. As right now, this is a group that has 10 different guys averaging at least 5.5 points per game and scores 3 through 10, all between 9.5 and 5.5 points per game. That includes Samatro Cyril down low, who's been able to give you about 2.5 blocks, 8.5 rebounds per game. So these guys have been able to do a nice job there. And for Florida State, this is a live by the 3, die by the 3 sort of team. They are currently a top 3 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of shots that come from 3-point range. That got them in a lot of trouble against Texas A&M. It's right now they're shooting 32% from 3. That's below average in the country. Lajay Jones has been solid, coming over from St. Bonaventure, shooting 36% from 3, about 14 points per contest. Robert McRae is a really nice point guard who's able to give you 8 assists. He was a doodle guy over at Jacksonville a season ago, but he's shooting less than 30% from 3-point. Jacoby McGee last year shot 40% from 3 over at Drexel, down to 30% this season. I do almost think that because teams know what's coming, that's really hurting them. Now, for this Florida State team, they've been very good at generating turnovers. Top 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Georgia's a top 15 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and both teams have protected the ball relatively well. Georgia's allowing teams to shoot 31.5% from 3. Part of that is against outgun competition, so I do think that that's going to be going a little bit northward, but that said, I do think that in the end, Georgia is going to be able to do a little bit of a better job on the inside. I do think that Georgia gets a job done in a game that should see a lot of tempo. Both of these teams in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set a total here of a 174. I like the over, and with Georgia willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 661, 662 on the card. North Carolina's on the road against Kentucky, and Big Blue Nation does find themselves as a favorite here. That's Kentucky, by the way, of 7.5 points. So on this game, it's 160.5, and set a line of 5.5. I'm going to be one to take the points with North Carolina. North Carolina did not get a lot of offense going against Michigan State. This is not the Michigan State defense. So I will say for Kentucky, even though they're dealing with the injury to Jaden Quantens, they have been pretty rock solid down low. You've had Malachi Moreno as a freshman give you 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. It is a Kentucky team that has done a pretty solid job in terms of limiting second and third chances. Top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever, outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But even someone like a Mohamed Diabate who's been able to give you 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. It's just been a case where this Kentucky team has been hit or miss from 3. Colin Chandler shooting 49% from 3, 11.5 points, 3 assists per game. He's been a nice find for the team after he was more of an ancillary guy a season ago. But right now, your main 2 guys are Denzel Aberdeen, part of that Florida team that won the title last year, shooting 39% from 3, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2.5, 14 points per game, and Ortega Owe. Not necessarily as much of a facilitator, 13 points, but need him to shoot a little bit better than 32% from 3-point range. And for this North Carolina squad, not having Seth Trimble out there after he had like workout equipment or something like that fall in his hand, that's not great. You've been having this team be a little bit more disjointed in the backcourt, though I will say Luka Bogvic, who comes over from Montenegro, has been able to give you 12 points, 3.5 assists per game. That's big because Kyan Evans has a big responsibility trying to run the offense coming over from Colorado State. I thought that was maybe a little bit too big of a leap up for him, but you've got the men down low, and Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar, that I think are going to keep the team lively. Wilson has been great, 20 points, 10 boards, steal and a half, block and a half per contest, and then Vassar shoots 42.5% from 3-point range with 16 points per game, so very rock solid there. Jonathan Boom Boom Powell's not had too much of a role for the team, but he gives you added size along Jerron Stevenson, and I do think that North Carolina is going to be able to hold in this game. Obviously, these are 2 teams that are not shy to run, to say the least, but North Carolina not quite as up-tempo as they have been in past years. They're still fast, but they're more around about 109th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Kentucky more around about 122nd. So I do feel like this total is going to be one of intrigue. I think that you get some late game fouling to be able to help you out with that, and I do think that the 3-point shooting, Kentucky goes northward, North Carolina finds their bearings a little bit more in that backcourt with another game without Seth Trimble. So set a total of 163.5. I like the over, and with Kentucky could only make them a 5.5 point favorite, I'll take those points with North Carolina. 663, 664 on the card. It is Nevada, and they're going to be playing us at UC San Diego, and UC San Diego is a underdog of 4.5 points. 150.5 to 151.5 is the total line for Nevada. Set them as a 5-point favorite. I do not want to go a hair above a 4.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 4.5 with Nevada. His squad has been able to do a pretty solid job down low. Joel Armatrading being able to give you 6+ rebounds per game, and for UC San Diego, very impressive what we saw them do last week out there in the lovely state of Florida, being able to win the ESPN Invitational. But right now this team is shooting 42.5% from 3, and then that last game against Towson, they went 16 of 25 from 3. Let's call it what it is. That's just not sustainable. Not quite generating the same amount of turnovers as they did a season ago. They're outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're outside the top 335 in terms of percentage of the missed shots that become an offensive rebound. That said, this has been a pretty solid squad at taking care of the ball themselves. 10.5 turnovers per game with Leo Beef being your main guy. 20 points, 5 boards. He's right now shooting 53% from 3-point shit. Each of your top 4 scorers are shooting over 40% from 3. Alex Shulkin, that's actually sustainable. When he was in the Patriot League last year, shot well over 40% from 3. 9 points, shooting 40.5% from the outside. Tom Beatty, though, he's right now shooting 48% from 3 with 13.5 points per game. This is a man that Hawaii last year shot 25% from 3-point range. I think he could be better than 25% from 3, but we should see a little bit of a cool down coming here. And for this UC San Diego team, they have been allowing teams to take a lot of shots from 3-point range. They're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 3, and they're allowing opponents to shoot a little bit over 34% from the outside. This Nevada team has been a little bit hit or miss with their 3-point shooting, but overall about 35%. Corey Camper's come over from UTEP, 16 points on 38% 3-point shooting, about 2 assists per contest. It's a Nevada team that's a little bit better at generating turnovers than a season ago, but they're just doing a nice job of taking care of the ball themselves. Top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You've been having this team be a top 75 unit in terms of not allowing second and third chances on the glass as well. Chuck Bailey has been very versatile, a pair of assists, 7.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, and then Elijah Price, who comes over from Fresno State, a block, 8 rebounds, 12 points per contest, and I think that the X factor here is Sean Comer, not shooting well from 3, but comes over from Evansville, along with, I believe, Eastern Kentucky, 14.5 points, 4 assists to fewer than 2 turnovers per game. I do think that Nevada, with a rough and tumble defense, and it's a Nevada style that is not really going to be looking to push a lot of tempo. Nevada is about 211th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UC San Diego, they've been able to crank things up a little bit more here in this new coaching regime, but they're still hovering right around about 240th in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that it's going to be more of a moderate tempo game, so I did set my total at a 147. I like the under, and with Nevada, willing to lay up to 4.5 with them. 665, 666 on the card. It is Utah on the road against Cal. California is an 8.5 to a 9.5 point favorite. Total on this game between 153.5 to 154.5. Made Cal the 9.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with them. For Utah, it just feels like it's a little bit of a disjointed bunch other than Terrence Brown. Terrence Brown is right now a top 10 scorer in all of college basketball, as this man is supplying 21.8 points, 3.5 assists per game, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, and Tom McHenry, who comes over from Western Kentucky, 40.5% 3-point shooter, 18 points per game. He's been able to do a rock solid job, but outside that, it's very sketchy, and this is a Utah defense that's well outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They played most of their games at home, and they've had a lot of fights against mid-major teams, and outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis as well. You've had Keno Dawes do a really nice job on the glass, 7.5 rebounds per game, and then you've had James Okonkwo, since he's come back, be able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game, really not giving you any sort of scoring whatsoever, but I mean, you could use some defense if you're this bunch. But for Cal, when the teams that Mark Madsen had were very good over at Utah Valley, they actually played a bit more of a brisk tempo, but they were just a really good defense, and they seem to be getting back to those roots. As Cal, not going to generate a ton of turnovers, but they're a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They've been having a little bit of a tough time on the defensive glass. They're outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but You've had the backcourt really step up as they shoot as collective 38% from three. Chris Bell, Day-Day Ames, they are combining for about 35 points per game, and they're combining to shoot over 47% from three. Should see a little bit of regression there. John Camden shooting 36.5% from three with 13.5 points per game. Very, very sustainable. Ryan Petratus, who was a little bit of a more featured guy last season, has taken on a little bit more of a backseat role here. 5.5 points, 4 boards per contest, but he's been rock solid. Lead Ward I'll give you about 6 rebounds per game. He's really the lone guy that gives you 5+ rebounds per game, but in a game involving a Utah team that, other than Dawes, you really don't have a lot down low, I think the Cal is going to be able to find a way to get the job done. It's going to be interesting to see how the Cal tempo really adjusts towards the back half of the season. They're about 106th right now in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Utah in this new system, they're about 107th, so both of these teams on the same wavelength there. Did set a total of 154.5 with Utah not playing great defense, and I think this could be just close enough for late game falling, so in on the over, and with Cal, willing to lay tonight with them. 667, 668 on the card. USC is on the road against Oregon. Oregon is a home underdog of 1.5 points. 156.5 is the total, and made USC the 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. USC should be able to just absolutely maul down low. They're 5th in the country in terms of percentage of opponent shots that are swatted away, as Gabe Dines, who comes over from Youngstown State, he's right around 7'2", 7'3". He has not given you a lot of scoring with only 3 points per game, but a little bit over a block per contest. Jacob Kofi, 2.5 blocks, 7.5 boards, 10 points per game. And then Chad Baker-Mazara, the Van Wilder of college basketball, 20.5 points, block and a half, 5.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's right now shooting 38.5% from three, and Ronnie Rice is shooting 38.5% from three with 20.3 points per game himself. This USC team is just rock solid there. Now USC, if you look at their total possessions per game, is 20th in the country. Warped stat because they play that triple overtime game against Troy. If you look at possessions per 40 minutes, they're a brisk tempo team, but they're not super duper up tempo. And this is a mid-tempo Oregon team, right around about 200th in terms of total possessions per game, but sloppy with the ball. They're outside the top 175 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis because they're turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game. Now they're doing a great job on the offensive glass, top 30 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They're resulting in an offensive rebound, but they're outside the top 275 in both 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Nate Biddle's had to do a bit of everything once again for the team. 16 points, 8 boards, 2.5 blocks, shooting 35% from three. And TK Simpkins, after he wasn't a great 3-point shooter over at Elon, 12.5 points, shooting 37.5% from the outside, but this is just a very limited offensive team. They're turning the ball over a little bit too much themselves. They don't generate a lot of turnovers on defense. I think the USC goes on the road, especially with all that size, and gets the job done. Set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with the USC. Set a total of 150.5, so I'm also in on the under. 669, 670 on the card. It's supposed to be the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board, but you're going to get a bonus. You got St. Louis on the road against Loyola Marymount. Marymount is an underdog of 6.5 points. 145.5 is the total, and I did set a total here of a 147.5, so I'm going to be in on this total over. I do think that for Loyola Marymount, they're going to have a little bit of tough time slowing down a St. Louis team that has been very good with their offense. They're a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But for St. Louis, they've got one issue. Turnovers. They're outside the top 285 in terms of ball security. They're turning the ball over 15 times per game, but you've got a plethora of different guys that are just providing for the team. 7 different guys with at least 8.6 points per contest. Robbie Avila, he's only giving you 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, but he doesn't need to do as much as he did a season ago because now you've got Amari McCautry giving you 12 points per game. Deion Brown comes over from Boston College and UMBC, 12.5 points per game, and it's not even as if this is an unsustainable 3-point shooting percentage for St. Louis. They're shooting 36% from the outside, and this has been a squad that has been pretty solid on the boards as well. They find themselves in the top 75 with regards to a rebound percentage as well. But for the Loyola Marymount team, I love what MJ Amy is bringing to the table. He's in season number 2 with the program. He's been able to give you 15.5 points. He's shooting 38% from 3-point range. Rodney Brown Jr., he's been able to do a nice job shooting 40% from the outside. He's flying 13 points per game. It is a Loyola Marymount team that has been middle of the road in terms of generating turnovers. Not great, not terrible. They're preventing a lot of second and third chances as well. They've been a top 85 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think that interior defense is going to be able to keep them quite lively here. Aaron McBride has been able to give 8 points per game. It's a team with a lot of good balance, and I do think that Rokas Josias, who comes over from Central Florida along with LaSalle, who he 2 seasons ago over at LaSalle was giving that team 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, is capable of popping it from 3 at 6'10". That versatility to be able to match up with Avila blah. I think that that's just enough for Marymount to be able to hold in there, and I do think that you get a little bit of late game following here. So you're at the 145.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over, and with Marymount only set them as a 3.5 point home underdog, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. And then I promise you guys a bonus, and we've got North Carolina A&T and Charlotte. This will probably be added to the board in the AM, as this is going to be 671, 672. For some reason, they just forgot to list this game to start with, but right now with A&T, I set them as a 14.5 point underdog. No numbers up on this game because the bookmakers have completely forgotten about this game, but we'll go up to 14 with Charlotte, 15 or more. Take the points with A&T, set a total of 146.5, so 146 or less. I'm in on the over. 147 or higher the under. This is a Charlotte team that's playing at one of the slowest tempos in all of college basketball. Outside, they'd have to 85 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for North Carolina A&T, 99th in terms of total possessions per game. And North Carolina A&T has never necessarily been monsters of the midway with regards to their defense, and they aren't once again this year. They're giving up about 80 points per game despite playing a D2 team or two, as they've only been able to play 5 games in total. You've had LaRon and Lewis Walker squared, be able to combine for about 43.5 points per game, but the problem is LaRon Walker has been dealing with a little bit of injury. He's been missing the last 2 games, so that's not great to say the least. You've got a team that down low, they lose their top rebounder Nicolas Chatakoulis, so they're in mix and match mode there, as Lewis Walker is right now the lone guy that's giving you really over 5.5 rebounds per game, other than Amadou Doumbia, who's actually been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, but he's giving you absolutely no scoring whatsoever. It's an A&T team that is allowing opponents to shoot over 39% from 3-point range. It's less than savory to say the least, and it's a squad that has been turning the ball over about 14 times per game. And for Charlotte, it's been a little bit mix and match in the backcourt, but they've been able to do a better job in terms of taking care of the ball ever since they brought in Dezane Mingo, who he was over at Marshall 8 seasons ago. He's done a nice job providing this team with 10.5 points, about 4 assists per game. It's a Charlotte team that they've always had some sketchiness with their defense. They're allowing opponents to shoot 37% from 3-point range, and they don't generate a lot of turnovers outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. At 65% free throw shooting is not necessarily so great, but you do have Anton Bonke, who's got a lot of nice size. He's been able to give you 9 boards, about 11.5 points per game, 7'2" big man that comes in for Providence. He should certainly be able to dump truck this A&T team down low. And then Ben Bradford, 17.5 points. He's been a really good find for this team in year number 2. Kylan Blackman has not really been able to ascend, but Major Freeman, who comes over from Siena, is able to give you about 9.5 points per game. This Charlotte team, they themselves only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per game. So do think that you get a relatively moderate game here, 146 or less, and on the over, 147 or higher the under. 1 up to 14 with Charlotte, 15 or more taking the points with A&T, and now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-613, 306-614. George Washington, our nation's first president, is on the road against Army, and Army does find themselves as 21.5 point underdogs. So on this game, it is 159.5 to 160.5, and with Army, I did set them as an 18.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. This is a George Washington team that is in the top 70 in terms of total possessions per game, so they're looking to fly in. This has been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. Now you get back to Garrett Johnson, who was one of their main guys from 2 seasons ago. Missed the first 2 games of the season, but he's making up for lost time. 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, and it's a team that as a whole is shooting about 39% from 3-point. Johnson is shooting 45.5% from 3. Top scorer Rafael Castro doesn't pop it from 3 at 6'10", but in a steal, a block, 16 points, 8 rebounds per game. He's rock solid there, and this is an Army team that is looking to bomb from 3. This Army team is right now attempting over 53% of their shots from 3-point range, and it's a George Washington team that is allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3 last season, and it's really not a fluke. They were last year a top 65 team at opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well, and for Army, you lose 4 out of your top 5 scorers from the season ago, so Ryan Curry has to do it all. 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 13.5 points per game. He's shooting just 29% from 3. Army, even though they take all these threes, they shoot only 29% from the outside, but it is an Army team that's been able to do an okay job on the defensive glass. Top 175 team in terms of not allowing second and third chances. It's an Army team that's about 192nd in terms of total possessions per game. Not great, not terrible. They have nothing down low. They're about a 5 team in terms of block shot percentage. You've been able to have Jordan Everson be able to give you about 9 points. Other than Ryan Curry, you've only got one other player that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Tate Lukowski, who's been able to give you about 4 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. This is going to be an 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time tip. So some sleepy guys. I do think that the discipline of Army actually helps them out a little bit in this spot. So I did set them as an 18.5 point underdog. For Army, bottom 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. So think that you get a little bit more of a slog. Semi-total 154.5, like the under and the points here with Army. 306-615, 306-616. UT Martin is going to be playing against the Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. So this game, it is 149.5, and I did say UT Martin as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got dueling styles here. UT Martin is the third worst team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Charleston Southern is creating the fewest turnovers per possession of any team in all of college basketball. Situation of something's got to give. And for Charleston Southern, there's Son Nimbley, who was a very good guard for them like a decade and a half ago. This team does have a little bit more rough and tumble down low. They've been dealing with an injury to Devin Bradford, but the other Bradford brother, Nate Bradford, has come in. He's been able to give the team 6 points, 5 boards after he was rock solid low post piece over at Georgia Southern, and then it's been all about Bryson Blaine. This guy's come from out of nowhere. Give the team 23.5 points, 8 boards, 4 assists. He was like a flame out over at James Madison a few seasons ago. He goes out to the non-D1 ranks, and he has resurfaced, and he has been great. Alan Sumler, after he missed all of last season, has been versatile with about 13.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, but I think the difference maker is going to be the 2-point shooting percentage, because both of these teams are shooting over 36% from 3, but it's a Charleston Southern group that is about 255th in the country with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. UT Martin is a top 75 team with this regard, and for this Tennessee Martin team, you've got a squad that just has so much size around the perimeter. Like, everyone's between 6'5" and 6'8". Everyone's able to go bombs away from 3. You've got 3 main scorers, and Mateus Denius along Dragos Lungu and Andreja Bomakovic. Hopefully I said that correct. You've got quite literally 12 different countries represented on this UT Martin team, so I mean it when I say that they're the international men of mystery, but for Bomakovic, he's been able to give you about 16 points, 8.5 boards, shooting 52% from 3-point range. You've got Phil Petrovic, who's been able to give you about 6 points. He throws in there 3.5 assists per game, but it's been Philip Radkovic, who's been able to give you 4 assists per contest. Yeah, they're giving my mouth a workout here. And then you've got Ty Price, who's been dealing with an injury. That was a nice, easy one. He's only giving you about 4 points per contest anyway, but I do think that for UT Martin, team has right now allowing teams to shoot only about 26% from 3-point range. I do think that they're going to be able to take better care of the ball against a Charleston Southern team that really doesn't force the issue. You do have a pair of teams that they're going to be looking to run a little bit more, maybe not at warp speed, but this is a UT Martin team that's about 193rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. With Charleston Southern, they've been very much pushing tempo at 48, so at my total at 152, I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with UT Martin. 306-617, 306-618. Bryant is going to be playing us Cornell. Cornell is a underdog here of 6.5 points, 130.5 to 131.5 is the total, and I did set a total of a 141.5. I'm going to be in on the over. You've got a Bryant team that's right now outside the top 350 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Cornell has been outside the top 300 themselves. With Cornell, a lot of it has to come back to the injury to the Holy Cross transfer in Will Batchelor. He's probably going to be out once again, but still have 2 nice pieces in the backcourt from a season ago. Chad Stinson, 7.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's got some versatility, and then Herman Coffey. He's been supplying the team with about 16 points per game. He's had to do a lot of this by himself, shooting 40% from 3, and Batchelor being out has really hurt them because he was shooting about 46% from 3, was a rock solid 3-point shooter over at Holy Cross last season as well. But for the Cornell team, a big issue for them has been the turnovers. They have been turning the ball over 15 times per contest, outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, but they only generate about 9 turnovers per game themselves, and a Bryant team has been pretty sloppy with it themselves, and they're the exact same. They're outside the top 275 in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers themselves. Both of these teams should be able to find a little bit more, shall we say, oomph with their offense, and for Bryant shooting 26% from 3, they're not going to be a great 3-point shooting team, but they're a little bit better than this. Quincy Allen, a former top 150 recruit, 10 points, 2 blocks, a steal and a half. He's right now only shooting 25% from 3. Should be seeing that go northward. I do think that for this Bryant team, they're going to be able to get some good production down low out of Keegan Harvey. He actually went to George Washington back when Jamion Christian was over there at 6'10". He's been able to supply the team with 6.5 points, 4 boards per contest, and Timothy Rodolfsky has been able to give 12.5 points, pair of assists. He's actually been able to shoot 35% from 3-point range. A 6'9" do-it-all freshman that's come over from the country of Russia, but I do think that for Cornell, they do a nice job in terms of holding in there because they themselves have been a top 175 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They've been an okay 3-point shooting defense as well, and I do think that both offenses have very much struggled start to get it going here. Set my total 141.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to take 6+ here. Cornell sub my line at 5.5. 306-619, 306-620. Binghamton is going to be playing us at Lehigh, and Lehigh does find themselves as a 3 to a 3.5 point road favorite. Total on scheme between 139.5 to a 140, and set Binghamton as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. Now with this Binghamton team, They have done a rough job over the last few seasons in terms of the turnover battle, as they are outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, and they themselves just not generating a lot of turnovers. They are a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Should see that 25% 3-point shooting percentage go northward, and they do have a nice low post presence in Demetrius Lilly. He comes over from the Atlantic 10, 16.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and Jeremiah Quigley. He comes over after he 2 seasons ago was a really nice scorer over at Iona. Is right now giving the team 12.5 points, 4 boards, 6.5 assists per game. Just really couldn't get out there for George Mason last season, was dealing with an injury. But when he was at Iona, shot about 33% from 3, 9.1% this year. I'm not saying that he's going to be great, but I think that he can shoot better than 9.1% from 3. Jackson Bengini, a former double-figure scorer over at Stone Hill, has been able to give you 9 points per contest as well. And this has been a Binghamton team that year in and year out has been pretty solid on glass. Right now, they're within the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage. You got a Lehigh team that just really doesn't have a lot down low. Hank Alvey has a little bit of size at right around about 6'8", 6'9". He's been supplying this team with about 6 rebounds, 11 points per game. And then Nasir Whitlock has been pretty solid. He's been able to give you about 18 points per game. And the offense is getting a little bit more pop with Andrew Ogasevich, who missed the beginning part of the season. Now I'll give you 10.5 points per game, but it's a Lehigh team that they have not been able to generate any sort of second and third chances. They are outside the top 340 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, outside the top 320 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You're just getting completely lambasted there. They themselves are turning the ball over about 12.5 times per game, so I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a sloppier game. Caleb Thomas has been able to give this team about 7.3 assists per game, but do think that in the end, Binghamton finds a way to get the job done. I think both offenses improve very moderately here, but neither of these teams are necessarily looking to gun it, but I think that you get some late game fouling here as well. And with just this Binghamton team not being as under duress with regards to turnovers, I think that allows them to be a little bit cleaner with their offense. So somebody told 142. I like the over, and Binghamton on the money line. 36-621, 36-622. Neutral court game from Cherokee Center between UNC Asheville and UNC Greensboro. Greensboro's an underdog, 3.5 to 4.5 points. 146.5 is the total line. I did set my line at 2. I said Asheville is a favorite, so going to be willing to take those points with Greensboro. Now for Greensboro, they lost essentially 98% of their scoring from a season ago, so this has been a team that's been in much duress and much struggle this season. It's a Greensboro team that traditionally is going to be one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball under Mike Jones. You ask who, and I say Coach Mike Jones, but that said, right now for this Greensboro team, they have been once again about mid-tempo this year, 127th in terms of total possessions per game. That's uncharacteristically fast for them, and you've got a UNC Asheville team that's actually been uncharacteristically slow. As for UNC Asheville, typically this is a team that's looking to push a little bit more tempo, about to earn 18th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So set a total here of a 148. I'm just barely willing to go over, as this Asheville team outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they themselves turn the ball over about 15 times per game. But Greensboro, a bottom 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis themselves. Greensboro's allowing teams to shoot nearly 40% from 3. We should see a little bit of positivity there, as Justin Neely, who comes over from Albany, he's been great down low, 13.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. He is a lone guy in the roster that's giving you over 4 rebounds per game. Donald White Jr. has come over from the non-D1 ranks. He's been able to give you about 13 points per game. He's shooting only about 27% from 3. But with this UNC Asheville team, they themselves have Toya Solomon down low, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 16.5 points per game. And then Cameron Taylor, Justin Wright in the backcourt have been Mr. Wrights, as these two guys combined for about 34 points per game. Wright has been able to shoot 44% from 3. Was always a nice 3-point shooter when he was over at NC Central, but this is a unit in UNC Asheville that's just getting absolutely waxed on the glass. They're outside the top 325 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That's an issue, and then, well, along with the turnover issues, that does cause for a little bit of strife, and they should see a little bit of negativity to holding teams to shoot only about 28% from 3-point. I think the Greensboro's sped up themselves a little bit this season, execute. So, set my line at 2. I'm going to be able to take the points with Greensboro. Somebody told 148, so I'm also in on the over. 3-6-6-23, 3-6-6-24. SIU Edwardsville is on the road against North Florida. North Florida is a 6.5-point underdog. Total on this game is 154.5, and with North Florida, set them as a 4-point underdog. I'm going to be able to take the points with Edwardsville. This is a top 150 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I said this is a Southern Illinois team that's also in a lot of transition after Rayshawn Taylor, Mr. Do-It-All, from a season ago. He's not on the fold, so now you're really looking for that main head of the snake sort of ball handler, and Jack Champion, who comes over from Southern Indiana, has had to be that guy. He's not necessarily too much of a scorer, but he's been able to give you 8.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's been solid there. It's a a Edwardsville team that has been able to find a lot of rebounding, as you've got Miles Thompson, a 6'7", little bit of a do-it-all guy, give you 11 points, 7 boards. Last year shot over 40% from 3, down to 20% this year. Should see that go northward. Rank them 8th, 14.5 points, 5 boards. So it's a Edwardsville team that they should be able to win the battle down low. They've been a top 125 team with regards to rebound percentage, and they've been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. Here's the problem. North Florida is always looking to bomb it from 3. They're attempting as many 3-point shots as they are 2-point shots, and they're shooting 37.5% from 3, with Cameron Oriole being able to shoot 43.5% from 3, 17.5 points per game. This will go downward, but BJ Plummer right now shooting 56% from 3-point range. 6'6" combo guy who has come down from the non-D1 ranks, and he has been rock solid. Devin Hines comes over from the Patriot League, 8.5 points. Not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, but Mason Lee is shooting 45% from 3. It's a North Florida team that they absolutely give it up defensively as well. Right now, they're allowing opponents to shoot 27% from 3. That's going to go northward. They're outside the top 325 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They are right now allowing the most offensive rebounds to opponents of any team in all of college basketball. So the SIU Edwardsville rebounding is certainly going to come into play there, but I do think that this North Florida team going to be able to go bombs away from 3. You've got dueling styles here, as North Florida is a team that typically likes to run it and gun it, and you've got an SIU Edwardsville team that is looking to play a little bit more low and slow. For Edwardsville, right now about 243rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. North Florida, they're about 55th. I did set my total here at 152. I think that North Florida cools down a little bit, but I still think that even with that, they do just enough to hold in there. Won't take the points at home with North Florida, and I'm going to be in on the 154.5 under. 306-625, 306-626. You've got East Carolina playing against the Maryland Eastern Shore, and the Shore finds themselves as 13.5 point underdogs. So on this game, it is 130.5, and I set my line at a 13.5. If we can get down to a 13, one to lay with East Carolina. It's not an opener of 11.5, so 13 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. And set a total of a 131.5. You've got an East Carolina team that once again is having problems around the perimeter. As for East Carolina last year, they were outside the top 320 in both their 3-point shooting percentage and their 3-point shooting percentage defense. And right now, they're a bottom 30 team in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they're shooting 24.5% from 3. That said, they've been able to do a nice job down low. This has been a team that's been at the top 150 with regards to rebound percentage. They need to clean up the 15 turnovers per game, as the backcourt is just right now very much out of sorts. You've got Tabu Bailey along with Corey Culker combining for 18 points per game. You've been able to get about 3 assists per game out of Culker, but he's throwing the ball over darn near 3 times per contest. Both guys are shooting less than 27% from 3. And right now, Jordan Riley is shooting 41% from 3 with 19 points, 2 steals per game. He's been great. He's quite literally the only guy on the roster that's shooting above 30% from 3. And that includes guys that have only taken like 1 3 thus far this season, so that's not great. And Maryland Eastern Shore, out of 365 Division I teams, ranks 365th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis with 17 turnovers per game. You've got Joseph Lucandero be able to give you about 12.5 points per game. He's actually shooting 53% from 3, and the rest of the team has been all sorts of sorry from 3, other than Jaden Cooper shooting 35.5% from 3, but that's only 5 points per game. This team, I would expect to be a little bit better down low. Christopher Flippin, who gave you 5+ rebounds per game back, but he hasn't been able to give you too much. Dorian Staples has had a little bit of a long and winding road. Began his career at SIU Edwardsville, went down to the non-D1 ranks. He's been able to give you about 5 or so points per game, but it is a Eastern Shore team that has actually been pretty respectable with their defense. Top 200 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Teams are not shooting well from 3 against them, but they've been okay on the interior. But as we know, East Carolina, they're not shooting well from 3, and they're not going to attempt a lot of 3. So circumstance, we're at a 13 or less. I'm going to be willing to lay with East Carolina. Do you think both of these teams get online a little bit more with their offense? You've got a Maryland Eastern Shore team that, in terms of total possessions per game, it's a warped set because they're actually about 302nd, but they should be even lower because they've played a lot of overtime thus far this season. And for East Carolina, they're actually about 82nd in the country. So it's not a total 131 or less in on the over. And with East Carolina, we'll only lay up to 13 with them. 306-627, 306-628. Kennesaw State, we give our Odalane Kiffin go Owls. They are going to be playing us to Jackson State. Jackson State is an underdog of 12.5 to 13.5 points. 159 to 159.5 is the total line with Jackson State. Set them as a 21-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for this Jackson State team. They're outside the top 360 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. And it's a Kennesaw State team that they should be able to do gritty things to be able to get the job done. It's a Kennesaw State team that ranks in the top 80 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and you've got a bunch of Jackson State that just does not have anyone that's rebounding right now. Simeon Cottle is going to be the best guard in this game, 20.5 points, 3 assists. He's right now shooting 46% from 3 for a Kennesaw team that is whole. They're shooting 36% from 3. Ramon Seals says he'll shoot 39% from the outside. He, along Trey Simpson, Brandon Skip to Lou, all between about 10.5 to 11 points per contest. So a lot of equals outside that main head of the stake in Cottle. And for this Kennesaw State team, they've been allowing teams to shoot less than 43% from 2-point range. Now, if you look at games involving non-D1 teams, that goes down to 39.5%. But for Jackson State, even though they've got Deshaun Ruffin, a former top 100 recruit and a starter over at Ole Miss in the backcourt, he's been able to give you 13.5 points per game. It's just been a lot of struggle with this team because your top rebounder is Jamie Mitchell with 3.7 rebounds and 14.5 points per game. That's just not going to cut it. And this is not even a great 3-point shooting team. Like, if you're going to be built around guard play, you're going to need to pop it from 3. They're right now shooting 30% from 3. Dorian McMillan has been able to give you 12 points per contest. Devin Ree, who comes over from Louisiana Tech, began his career over at Louisville. 6.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game, just not cutting it. Jalen Tatum has been able to give you 3.5 rebounds per game, but he's currently dealing with an injury, so this is just not great on the front of Jackson State. And with a team built around guards, they're turning the ball over 15 times per game. They're outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. Jackson State has been looking to push a little bit more tempo this year in terms of total possessions per game. This team is checking in right around about 154th in the country. Meanwhile, you've got a Kennesaw team that's currently number 2 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So I do think that Kennesaw is going to be able to put up a nice big number here. Sub by total 163. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay with Kennesaw State. Go Owls, 306-629, 306-630. Jacksonville is going to be playing with Florida A&M. Jacksonville is a 10.5 point favorite. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total. Did set a total of 143.5. I'm in on the over. You've got a Florida A&M team that's well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You're number 1 under Charlie Ward, and this team has been looking to move it, but that said, the offense has not been moving in the right direction while they've been giving up 94 points per game. So that's not great. This team is shooting 26% from 3 points. We should see that go northward a little bit. Anquan Bolden Jr. has been able to give 8.5 points, 4 rebounds per game, and part of the reason why the numbers are so warped is that this team has only played 4 games, and one of them was against Georgia, where it was one of the ugliest games that you're ever going to find. Florida A&M right now, a bottom 15 team in the country in terms of ball security, 18.5 turnovers per game. They themselves have been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and even with the coaching change, they were able to maintain a few guys from a season ago, like you've got Caleb Washington back. He last season was giving this team some relatively good numbers as a 6'7", little bit of a combo player. Right now this season only about 4.5 points, 3 rebounds per game. Last year that was 7 points per game, and then you did return Jordan Chapman, who was a double-figure scorer a season ago. I think that he's going to be able to get back there. Last year shot 40% from 3, currently shooting 23.5% from 3-point range. Again, that number should be going northward a little bit, but for Jacksonville, I can only set them as a 7.5 point favorite, mainly because you lose all your rebounding from a season ago. This team, when they've been at their best under Jordan Mincy, have been very good down low. They don't have a single guy that's right now giving you more than 4.5 rebounds per game. Chris Arias, along Jalen Jones, have both been able to give you about 11 points per game, and you've got Jones shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Arias has been able to shoot 40% from the outside, but this is a team that as a whole is shooting less than 30% from 3. They've been doing a nice job not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Top 175 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but outside the top 250 in terms of ball security as well. Not great for a team that's based around a lot of guards. You've got Chris Lockett, who comes over from Boise State. He's able to give you about 8 points per game, and then Donovan Rivers, he's supplying about 8 points, 4.5 rebounds as a 6'9", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of player. But Alan Emadou, who comes over from Missouri State and Morgan State, he at 6'10", just has not been able to give the team any rebounding whatsoever, and I think Florida A&M is going to be able to find their bearings a little bit more. Did set my line at a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now you've got sort of dueling styles here, as I do believe that Florida A&M, and when it's all said and done, they're going to be an up-tempo team, currently 12th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, byproduct of a small sample size. Meanwhile, you've got a Jacksonville team that they're looking to slow things down a little bit more to 337th, set by total 143.5, like the over, and the points here of Florida A&M, 36-631, 36-632. Tulane is going to be playing us a Grambling, and Grambling does find themselves as an underdog of 10.5 points, 145.5 is the total line. With Tulane, I did set them as a favorite of 8.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 10 plus here with Grambling. With Tulane, this squad is just not necessarily necessarily doing a great job down low because they don't have a lot of size. You've got a really good guard in Rowan Bumba, who's going to be the best player in this game as he's supplying the team with 19 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists per game. But this team is grabbing 5.7 offensive rebounds per game. That is dead last in all of college basketball. And this is a unit that is actually looking to drive the ball a little bit more down low, as you've had Curtis Williams be able to give the team 14.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's shooting 42% from 3 as well. We're starting to see this team cool down from distance a little bit, and they're outside the top 3 in terms of generating turnovers as well. And for this Grambling team, they should be able to have quite a bit of success because one of their main kryptonites has been turning the ball over 15 times per game. They bring in Patrick Crary, who was the coach last season over at Florida A&M, and he's brought with him Roderick Coffey, was a nice do-it-all sort of player, and he's doing that once again this year. 2 steals, 4 assists, 9 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. Currently shooting 50% from 3. We'll see that go southward, but that said, this is also a Grambling team that's been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're going to be outgunned in a lot of cases down low, as right now they're outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage, but in this game, that's not such a big factor because Tulane just doesn't have a ton down low. And you got Antonio Munoz, who's been able to give you 13.5 points for this Grambling team. Grambling has been a little bit up, down, all around. They've taken some losses, but they've been able to hold in there against a team like a UC Riverside. They held in there against San Diego, so this team has been able to do a relatively solid job there. And when it came to Florida A&M last season, that was more of a mid-tempo team that Curry coached up. Right now, the Grambling, about 229th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. This is a Tulane team that has seen a lot of different tempos over the last few seasons. This one is one that is going quite a bit more slowly at about 266, so I did have a little bit of a pickle here with regards to this one, but I did set a total of a 152.5. I think that Tulane is going to be cranking up their tempo. I think the Grambling is going to have a little bit of a tough time defensively, but they're going to clean up the turnovers against a Tulane team that really doesn't force too many, so I'm in on the over, and the points were Grambling 366-33, 366-34. Long Island plays us to Winthrop, and Winthrop does find themselves as a favorite on the road of between 6 and 6.5 points. 154.5 to 155.5 is the total line. With Long Island, I set them as a 3.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Long Island has really sped themselves up after being outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game last season, but you're starting to see that go a little bit downward. That game against IU Indy really threw things a little bit for a loop, and I do think that for Long Island, they're going to be able to get back to just getting a little bit more out of Shedrick Lassou down low. He was their top rebounder a season ago. This season, been a little bit disappointing with about 6.5 rebounds per game, and Malachi Davis has had to take a little bit of a backseat to Greg Gordon in the backcourt. These two guys, along Jamal Fuller, all give you between 12.7 and 14.2 points per game between the three of them, and it's sort of been facilitation by committee, as right now you've got 3 different guys, these 2 guys, and Gordon and Davis, to go along with Jumbo Goings, will all give you between 2.1 and 3 assists per game, and that's caused them to be a little bit out of sorts on offense. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and it's been a bit disappointing for the 7-footer and Isaiah Miranda, former top 200 recruit of Oklahoma State and NC State. I'll give you about 4.5 points per game, but it does feel like they're starting to figure things out a little bit more with regards to their just strong defense that carried them last season in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, well outside the top 200 this season. And for Winthrop, you've been able to have a lot of production out of Mr. Rozier, Kareem Rozier. He comes over from Duquesne, and last season at Duquesne, he did a nice job building out good, clean offense over there. He's come in and he's given the team 14 points, 4.5 assists, and himself shooting 43.5% from 3. And Winthrop last year got to the free throw line frequently, but they were one of the worst free throw shooting teams in all of college basketball. Now they're shooting about 75% of the free throw line, and they're doing a much better job of taking care of the ball. Only about 10 turnovers per game, and this is still a Winthrop team that is looking to push tempo. It's not necessarily the same tempo that they have in the past. Winthrop, right now, in terms of total possessions per game, about 95th, so they've slowed down a half a hair. You've been able to get some production down low out of Logan Duncombe, about 13.6 rebounds per game, but this team has taken a little bit of setback in terms of grabbing second and third chances. This is a Winthrop team that's still outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage as well. So interesting spot here. I do think that Long Island going to continue to slow themselves down a little bit more, and it does feel like they're starting to round into that same defensive form that they had a season ago. So taking the points with Long Island, set them as a 3.5 point dog, and on the under, set my total at a 153.5. 306-635, 306-636. Maryland is playing us a Wagner. Wagner is a 22.5 point underdog. 142 to 142.5 is the total. And with Maryland, I did set them as a favorite here of 23.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Wagner is currently under an interim coaching regime, and that's a big reason why we've seen them speed up greatly from a season ago. Last year, they were outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game, and now they find themselves as a mid-tempo team, and the defense has eroded. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. They're currently shooting 41.4% from three. Not going to last. Eduardo Placer, the brother of Jose Placer, was really solid out there in the Atlantic Sun many years ago. 11 points, 4 boards. He's shooting 48% from three. And then Benio Basil, he's been able to give the team 7 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. It's a Wagner team that's doing an okay job of grabbing second and third chances, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage as well. Maryland should be able to eat them alive with that. You've got a Maryland team that does have quite a few guys that haven't been able to do a nice job down low. They've been missing a few guys like Solomon Washington, but that said, you've been able to get about 6.5 boards and 17.5 points per game out of Pharrell Payne, one of the main guys that came over with Buzz Williams from Texas A&M to Maryland. David Kewitt was a 20-point per game scorer a few seasons ago over at Northern Illinois. He's right now supplying 14.5 points per game, and then you've been able to have Darius Adams, Elijah Saunders, Andre Mills, all give you between 4 and 5.3 rebounds per game, and then Adams, as a freshman, has been able to start with about 14 points per game. It's a Maryland team that is right now allowing teams to shoot 37% from three. I don't think that they're going to be a great perimeter defense, but I certainly do think that there's going to be some positive regression there. See negative regression with regards to Wagner and their outside shooting. And with Buzz Williams' teams, typically they're a little bit more grody. They're looking to play a little bit more slow and controlled. Maryland right now, in terms of total possessions per game, we're on 70th. I think that that's a byproduct of playing in lovely Las Vegas and some up-tempo teams. And I do think that that starts to slow down just a little bit more here, and I did set my total 143.5 because I do think that for Wagner, they're going to continue to give it up on defense. And I do think that for Maryland, they do find a way to be able to get second and third chances and get the job done down low. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over. And with Maryland, we'll lay up to 23 with them. 3-6-6-37, 3-6-6-38. You've got North Texas playing against Houston Christian. Houston Christian does find themselves as a 12.5 point underdog. So on this game, it is 128.5. Did some outline at 14. I'm going to be willing to lay with North Texas. North Texas has been dealing with a few injuries, but still, this is a Houston Christian team that they just are not finding any sort of offense whatsoever. They lose 3 out of their top 4 scores from a team that was very nice and surprising a season ago. Lone guy that really returns is Elijah Brooks, who, when he's been out there on the floor, has been able to give you 13.5 points, 6 boards per contest. But with Brooks, we have only seen him for 3 games thus far this season, and he's been a little bit rusty since coming back. That does give this team a nice shot in the arm, though, because you've got Kylan Green, who's had to do it all by himself. Comes over from Utah Valley, 13 points, 5 boards, 5.5 assists, but I mean, it was just getting overwhelming for a Houston Christian team that is right now, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, well outside the top 300 because they've been turning the ball over 13 times per game. They shoot less than 30% from three, and for this Houston Christian team, the big key for them has been not allowing second and third chances. They're a top 50 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but with North Texas, even though this is always going to be a team that's going to leave something to be desired down low. Daniel Robinson comes over from Cleveland State. His teams were always outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They've always been a team that's been rock solid with regards to offensive rebound percentage. They've been rather pedestrian with that regard, and they're probably going to be without Will McClendon once again in this game. But David Terrell, he's been able to give you 11.5 points, shooting 37.5% for three. Jashawn Stevenson, who comes over from Cleveland State, 17 points, stealing half per contest. North Texas doing a nice job generating turnovers. Top 55 team in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis. And with Houston Christian struggling from 3-point range, it becomes even bigger that this North Texas team is a top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've got a pair of teams that are really not going to be looking to push a lot of tempo. With North Texas, they're back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Houston Christian is 351st, but the Houston Christian defense just not what it was a season ago. And I do think the North Texas turns those turnovers into offense. Semi-total at 130, so I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 13.5 with North Texas. 3-6-6-39, 3-6-6-40. Nichols is on the road against Creighton, and Creighton does find themselves as a favorite of 20.5 to 21.5 points. 146.5 to 147 is the total, and I did set Creighton as an 18-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Nichols. Nichols still outside the top 275 towards points scored on a per possession basis, but for Creighton, they just have not wowed me thus far this season. They've been themselves well outside the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they just haven't found that alpha dog score. And for Nichols, they've had to turn Trey English into more of a facilitator, into being a primary scorer with about 13.5 points, 3 assists. Now he's only shooting 25.5% from 3-point range, but Jalen Surreals, who's the other main holdover from a season ago, he stepped up and has shot 40% from three-point. Just a Nichols team that's traditionally pretty good at being able to generate turnovers, back in the top 150 in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis. Zia Moda, who began his career over at Utah State and Sacramento State, 6'8", little bit of combo player, being out with injury, has hurt them. But Sincere Malone, who's 6'8", very versatile, comes over from Eastern Illinois a few seasons ago. He's been able to generate multiple steals, 3 assists, 12 points per game, shooting about 31% from three-point range. And for the screen squad, they're just not as imposing on the glass as they have been in the past. You can tell that they're missing Ryan Kalkbrenner and Owen Freeman. He was very good over at Iowa when he was fully healthy, but he missed the back half of the season last year due to injury and might not be fully recovered. He's right now only giving the team about 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and Josh Dix, who also came over from Iowa, he and Blake Harper have been able to combine for 23 points per game. Harper's been able to shoot about 40% from three, and he's throwing in there 6.5 rebounds per game, but still, it's a Creighton team that never has done a great job in terms of generating turnovers outside the top three in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. To the credit of Creighton, they don't put you on the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. They're making teams really go inside as well. They're not allowing teams to shoot it at all from three-point range, so the fact that this Nichols team has been a little bit suspect from the outside, that actually helps them out a little bit, and I think that that's going to be able to keep them lively, and I do think that there's going to be a little bit of life breathed into this Creighton offense as well, so I did semi-total at a 148. You've got a Nichols team that they're not necessarily flying with regards to their tempo, but they're certainly not one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. They're about 136th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Creighton squad that right now checking in only about 253rd, but I do think that that goes a little bit higher, so in on the over and the points with Nichols. We're wrapping things up with 306-641, 306-642. Grand Canyon is going to be playing us to Stetson. The Hetters do find themselves as an underdog of 23.5 points, 144.5 to 145.5 is the total. And with Grand Canyon, I did set them as a favorite of 21 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stetson. Grand Canyon back outside the top 80 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis after last season. They were really good at generating turnovers, not doing quite as much of that this year. Outside the top 100 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they allow opponents to shoot about 35% from three, and Stetson is always based around three-point shooting. Right now for Stetson, they're shooting about 34.5% from three. Not great, not terrible. You've had Ethan Copeland along Jake Johnson do a nice job combining for about 21.5 points per game and are both shooting pretty much identical, 41.2% clips from three-point range, but Jamie Phillips, the main returner from a season ago, he's been rock solid for this offense. 15.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. He's only shooting about 30% from three, but for Stetson, they become a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. They need to do a better job taking care of the ball. The 13.5 turnovers per game, that's been an issue, but again, Grand Canyon not generating turnovers the way that they have in the past, and this is a squad in Stetson that they really give it up on defense. Back outside the top 285 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 3 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. For Grand Canyon, they've had a lot of different styles. They're going a little bit more mid-tempo this year, about 230th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they should be able to control things down low with Nana Owusu-Anane, who's been able to do a nice job coming over from Brown after he missed all of last season. He's been able to give you 10 points, 10 boards, 3.5 assists per game. Great versatility there. And then in the backcourt, Jaden Henley has become the main go-to scorer with about 17 points per game, but Grand Canyon is only shooting about 30% from three. I do think that that's going to be going northward, especially with a guy in Dusty Stromer, comes over from Gonzaga. He's only shooting 30% from three with 7 points per game. He's too good to be shooting that low. Brian Moore Jr., he was able to give more over at Norfolk State a season ago where he supplied that team with 18 points on 39.5% three-point shooting, only about 10 points, shooting in the neighborhood about 33% from three thus far this season. And for Grand Canyon, they themselves have been a little bit sloppy with the 13 turnovers per game. I do think that this game is going to be a little bit cleaner with regards to offense, so I did set my total 151. This is a Stetson team that's getting gashed on the defensive side of things, in Grand Canyon, not what they were on defense as well, but I do think that Stetson hits enough shots to be able to cover this number, so I'm willing to take those points, set my line at 21, and I'm in on the over, and that'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Tristan Freeman of Boston Brackets for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with regards to picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.